A CEO's daughter burst through factory doors at midnight, blood on her dress, screaming that her mother is dying. The man she runs to? Just a janitor pushing a mop cart. But when Caleb Ward looks up with those cold, calculating eyes, something shifts in the air. 6 mercenaries hold her mother hostage 6 floors above, 15 minutes until they execute her. What no one knows, this janitor used to hunt men like them for a living. Tonight, he'll remember how. Before we begin, drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The fluorescent lights of Titan Defense Systems hummed their lonely midnight song, casting harsh shadows across polished concrete floors that stretched like frozen rivers through the massive facility. Caleb Ward had walked these corridors for 3 years now, pushing the same dented cleaning cart, wearing the same faded blue coveralls with Ward stitched in yellow thread over his heart. To the engineers and executives who occasionally passed him, he was furniture, human wallpaper that emptied trash bins and mopped up coffee spills. That's exactly how he preferred it. His cart's squeaky wheel echoed through B-Wing as he made his usual rounds, the sound rhythmic and forgettable. He'd just finished the 3rd floor restrooms and was heading toward the manufacturing sector when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the careful symphony of night shift machinery. Running footsteps. Small ones. Fast and desperate. Caleb's hand paused on the mop handle, his body going still in a way that would have alarmed anyone who truly knew him. His eyes, gray as winter steel, tracked the sound before he saw its source. Then she burst around the corner, a girl no older than 9 or 10, dark hair flying behind her, expensive private school uniform torn at the shoulder. But what made Caleb's blood turn to ice was the crimson handprint smeared across her white collar. Fresh blood. Still wet. "Please," the girl's voice cracked as she spotted him. "Please, you have to help. They're hurting my mom. They're going to kill her." She crashed into him with the full force of her terror, small hands clutching his coveralls. Caleb caught her shoulders, his movements controlled despite the adrenaline spike he felt flooding his system. He'd trained himself over 3 years to move like a custodian, slow, harmless, forgettable. But right now, old instincts were clawing their way to the surface. "Easy. Slow down." His voice came out calm, practiced, the same voice he'd used to talk down panicked civilians in Fallujah. "What's your name?" "Ella. Ella Kane. My mom is Victoria Kane. She's the CEO, and there are men, bad men. They have guns and they hit her and there's so much blood." The words tumbled out in a cascade of panic. Victoria Kane. Caleb's mind filed through information automatically. CEO of Titan Defense Systems, former Pentagon contractor, had revolutionized drone guidance systems that were now classified at the highest levels. Widowed 5 years ago. 1 daughter. Lived in the penthouse suite on the 7th floor of the adjacent residential tower, connected to this facility by the executive sky bridge. "Where?" Caleb asked, his hands still steady on the girl's shoulders. "Upstairs. The executive floor, in Mom's office. They came through the private entrance. They said—" Ella's voice hitched. "They said they'd kill her if she didn't give them the codes. That's when I ran. I hid in the service elevator like Mom taught me, and I got out and I didn't know where to go, and everyone's gone, and I saw you and—" "Shh. You did good. You did exactly right." Caleb glanced at his watch, 12:47 a.m., then down the empty corridor. The executive floor would be deserted at this hour, except for Victoria's dedicated security, which meant that security had either been compromised or eliminated. His jaw clenched. "How many men?" he asked. Ella's eyes widened. Most adults would have been asking where to call for help. This janitor was asking tactical questions. 6, maybe 7. I don't know. They were wearing black and they had— She struggled for the word. "Rifles?" "Yes, with lights on them. And they talked into radios. One of them grabbed Mom and threw her into a chair and hit her, and that's when I ran because she screamed at me to run, and—" Caleb's hand went to his pocket, closing around the battered smartphone he kept there. His finger hovered over the emergency dial. Standard protocol. Call the cops, get the kid to safety, let the professionals handle it. That's what janitors did. That's what fathers did. But in the back of his mind, a cold voice, The one that had kept him alive through 3 tours in places that officially didn't exist, did the math. Police response time from the nearest station, 12 minutes minimum, probably 15 at this hour. Time for a tactical team to assemble and breach, another 20 minutes. Hostage negotiation protocols, anywhere from hours to days. Victoria Kane didn't have hours. If these were professionals, and that equipment description suggested they were, she had minutes. Maybe less. "Please," Ella whispered, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "Please don't let them kill my mom." Caleb looked down at this terrified child and saw another little girl, one with his own hazel eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Abby. His daughter. Safe at home with the overnight sitter, probably curled up in bed with that ridiculous stuffed rabbit she refused to give up despite being too old for baby toys. What would he want someone to do if it were Abby's mother up there? If it were Abby running through these halls, desperate and alone? The decision crystallized in his mind with the cold clarity of combat training kicking back in after years of dormancy. "Listen to me very carefully," Caleb said, his voice dropping into something Ella had never heard before. Command authority wrapped in deadly calm. "Do you know where the security office is? Ground floor, east side?" Ella nodded. "You're going to walk, not run, walk to that office. There's a man named Marcus who works overnight security for the front desk. Tell him exactly what you told me, and tell him to call the police and lock down the building. Then you stay there with him until I come get you, or the police arrive." "Do you understand?" "But what about my mom? What are you going to—" "I'm going to help her, but I need you safe first. Can you be brave for just a little longer?" Ella stared at him, and something in his eyes, something hard and certain and utterly unafraid, seemed to steady her. She nodded. "Good girl. Go. Now." She ran, her footsteps fading into the distance. Caleb waited until he couldn't hear them anymore, then let out a slow breath. His hand went to his pocket again, but this time he pulled out a different phone. A burner, pay-as-you-go, the kind you could buy at any convenience store. He had 3 of them. Habit. He dialed a number he hadn't called from inside this building before. "Daddy?" The voice was sleepy, confused. "It's really late." "I know, baby girl. I'm sorry to wake you." Caleb was already moving, pushing his cart toward the service elevator with purpose now, the squeaky wheels singing its off-key song. "Is Mrs. Chen still awake?" "She's watching TV in the living room. Daddy, what's wrong? You sound weird." "Nothing's wrong. I just need you to do something for me. Can you put Mrs. Chen on the phone?" There was rustling, the sound of small feet padding across hardwood floors. Then an older woman's voice, crisp with concern. "Mr. Ward, is everything okay?" "Mrs. Chen, I need you to take Abby to your apartment across the hall, right now. Pack an overnight bag first, just the essentials. Keep your phone on. If you don't hear from me by 2 a.m., I need you to call Detective Sarah Chen at the 5th Precinct. Her number's in my address book on the kitchen counter. Tell her Caleb Ward called in marker 7. There was a pause. Mrs. Chen had been Caleb's neighbor for 2 years, a retired schoolteacher who'd lost her husband and found purpose in doting on the polite single father and his daughter across the hall. She was sharp enough to hear what he wasn't saying. "How much danger are you in?" "Unknown. Probably minimal. But I need to know Abby's secure before I can focus. She'll be safe with me. Whatever you have to do, Mr. Ward, do it, and come home. That's the plan." "Daddy?" Abby's voice came back on the line, higher now with worry. "What's happening?" Caleb pressed the service elevator button. The doors opened with a hydraulic sigh. "Remember when we talked about how sometimes grown-ups have to help people even when it's scary? Like when you pulled Mr. Herrera out of that burning car? Just like that. Someone needs help tonight, and I'm the only one close enough to do it. So I need you to be my brave girl and go with Mrs. Chen. Can you do that for me?" "Are you going to be okay?" The elevator doors closed. Caleb looked at his reflection in the polished steel, a man in his late 30s, average height, lean build, with the kind of forgettable face that people's eyes slid right past. But in the dim elevator light, something else showed through. The set of his jaw, the way his eyes focused on middle distance, calculating. A hunter's eyes. "Always am," he said. "I love you, Abby." "Love you too, Daddy." He ended the call and let the phone slip back into his pocket. Then he pressed the button for B2, the sub-basement maintenance level. Not up, down. Because Caleb Ward hadn't survived 3 tours in Force Recon by kicking in front doors. The elevator descended with a mechanical whir. Caleb used the 30 seconds to center himself, to let the person he'd been for 3 years, the quiet janitor, the forgettable maintenance man, sink back beneath the surface. In its place, rising like a shark from dark water, came Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Ward, USMC Force Reconnaissance, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a service record that was still classified in 17 different ways. The doors opened onto darkness and concrete. The sub-basement was a labyrinth of old infrastructure, back when this facility had been a Cold War-era manufacturing plant. Pipes and ductwork snaked across the ceiling like metal vines. The air smelled of machine oil and old rust. Caleb moved through it like he'd been born there, because in a way, he had been. The first thing he'd done when taking this job 3 years ago was map every inch of this facility. Every ventilation shaft, every service tunnel, every forgotten access point. Knowledge was survival. Preparation was life. He passed his usual maintenance closet, the one where he kept industrial cleaning supplies and spare mop heads. But tonight, he walked 15 feet further, to a second closet, this one locked with a padlock that only he had the key for. The door swung open silently. He'd oiled the hinges himself. Inside, hidden behind boxes of fluorescent light tubes and reams of paper towels, was a military-grade duffel bag. Caleb pulled it out and unzipped it in one smooth motion. Body armor. Not the heavy tactical gear he'd worn in Baghdad, but a lightweight civilian vest, level 2A, rated for handgun rounds. He stripped off his coverall top and strapped it on over his t-shirt. Then the coverall went back on over it. A little bulkier, but not enough for anyone to notice in a crisis. Next, a collapsible baton, the kind cops carried. He'd never needed it in 3 years, but he'd practiced with it weekly in his apartment. Muscle memory didn't fade. It just waited. A small first aid kit went into his pocket. Zip ties went into another pocket. And then, from the very bottom of the bag, he pulled out a knife, a fixed-blade KA bar, 7 inches of blackened steel that had saved his life in places he couldn't name. He strapped it to his belt, hidden beneath the coverall. Last, he pulled out a small tactical earpiece and microphone setup. Old tech, but reliable. He fitted it into his ear, clipped the transmitter to his belt, and tapped it twice. The green light blinked. Active. "Mic check," he whispered. His own voice echoed back in his ear, tinny but clear. "Good." Caleb closed the duffel, locked the closet, and checked his watch. 12:53 a.m. Then he moved. The executive floor was accessible by 3 routes. The main elevator, 2 exposed. The executive elevator would require Victoria's keycard and was probably guarded. Or the service shaft that maintenance used for HVAC repairs. The shaft ran from B2 straight up to the executive level's equipment room, bypassing all security checkpoints. It took Caleb 4 minutes to navigate to the access point, a vertical ladder bolted to concrete, stretching up into darkness. He tested the first rung, then began to climb. 7 floors, 70 feet. His hands found each rung by memory and touch, his breathing controlled and steady. The body armor added weight, but his arms didn't shake. He'd done pull-ups every morning for 3 years. Maintenance work kept you strong if you did it right. At the top, a horizontal access hatch. Caleb pressed his ear against the metal and listened. Nothing. He eased it open an inch, letting his eyes adjust to the light bleeding through. The executive floor equipment room, a cramped space filled with server racks and HVAC controls, humming quietly to itself. Empty. He pulled himself up and through, closing the hatch silently behind him. Now he was inside the perimeter. Caleb moved to the equipment room door and cracked it open. Beyond was a service hallway, narrower than the main corridors, with bare walls and fluorescent strips. This was the building's backstage, where executives never walked, where cleaners and repairmen were invisible. He could hear voices now, muffled but distinct. Male voices, speaking in sharp, clipped sentences. Military cadence. "Sweeps clear. No sign of the girl. Targets secure. Boss wants the codes in 10 minutes or we start the pain compliance. Copy. Holding position." Caleb's jaw tightened. Pain compliance, torture and corporate speak. They were going to hurt Victoria until she gave them what they wanted. He moved along the service hallway, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. At the end was a junction. Left led to the executive offices, right to the conference rooms. The voices were coming from the left. He risked a glance around the corner. The executive corridor was a different world from the service halls. Rich hardwood floors, recessed lighting, original artwork on the walls. And standing 20 feet away, his back to Caleb, was a guard. Black tactical gear, rifle slung across his chest, radio earpiece visible. Professional stance, weight balanced, ready to move, but complacent. Because who would come from the service corridor? Only the help. And the help were all gone. Caleb watched him for 30 seconds, counting the rhythm of his breathing, noting how he shifted his weight every 15 seconds, cataloging the gear. Standard loadout, ex-military, probably private security contractor. The kind of men who took jobs like this because the pay was good and the moral questions were few. The kind of men Caleb had spent his career either working with or hunting, depending on which side of the law they'd landed on. He pulled back, thinking. 6 or 7 hostiles, per Ella's count, probably separated. Some with Victoria, some on perimeter security, maybe one on Overwatch. Standard operating procedure for a high-value target extraction. The smart play was to wait for the police. Let SWAT handle it. But Caleb thought about that cold voice saying 10 minutes and knew Victoria didn't have that long. So he did what any good Marine would do when outnumbered and outgunned. He changed the battlefield. Caleb moved back into the equipment room and went straight to the HVAC controls. The building's climate system was centralized here. Heating, cooling, ventilation, all running through a networked computer system that he'd been trained to maintain as part of his janitorial duties. His fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating menus he'd memorized years ago. Fire suppression protocols, emergency ventilation, smoke control. He activated the misting system for the executive floor, designed to suppress fires by flooding the air with fine water vapor. Not enough to soak everything, but enough to reduce visibility to a few feet. The system kicked in with a soft hiss. Then he killed the primary lights and activated the emergency lighting, dim red strips that ran along the baseboards, barely enough to navigate by. Through the wall, he heard someone swear. "What the hell? We got smoke!" "No fire alarm. It's the mist system. Someone's fucking with us." "Where's building control?" "Checking. Offline. Someone cut the remote access." Caleb smiled without humor. He'd cut the remote access himself 3 minutes ago. "Boss wants this floor locked down. Find out what's happening." "Copy." Footsteps in the hallway. The guard moving away from his post, going to investigate. Caleb slipped out of the equipment room and into the misted corridor. The world had become a red-lit fog, shapes bleeding into shadows. He moved like smoke himself, silent and swift. The guard was 20 feet ahead, his back still to Caleb, his rifle coming up as he peered into the mist. "Control, this is position 2. I've got visual interference across the whole floor. Possible hostile action. Request." Caleb covered the distance in 4 strides. His hand clamped over the guard's mouth as his knee drove into the back of the man's leg, folding him down. The baton came out in his other hand, striking precisely at the base of the skull. A controlled impact, enough to stun without killing. The guard went limp. Caleb caught the rifle before it could clatter to the floor, then dragged the body into the nearest office. Zip ties secured the man's wrists and ankles. A strip of duct tape, also from Caleb's pocket, sealed his mouth. One down. He checked the radio clip to the guard's vest. Commercial-grade encrypted channel. He couldn't transmit without the right authentication codes, but he could listen. "Position 2, report." Silence. 2, come in. More silence. "Shit, we got a problem. Kane, get the target ready to move. Everyone else collapse to the primary position. We're leaving in 5. Caleb's pulse quickened. They were adapting faster than he'd hoped. Professionals. Which meant they'd start making hard decisions soon. He moved deeper into the mist toward Victoria's office, following the layout he'd memorized. The executive suite was at the end of the corridor, a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He'd cleaned it 100 times. More voices ahead, tense now. "Don't know. Maybe the girl hit an alarm. Maybe building security is smarter than we thought. Building security is one fat guy downstairs watching football. This is something else. Doesn't matter. We get the codes and we're gone. Nobody has to die tonight if she cooperates. Caleb reached the reception area outside Victoria's office. 2 more guards here, flanking the doorway. Through the mist, he could see them shifting nervously, rifles up, scanning the fog. He couldn't take them both at once. Not quietly. So he didn't try for quiet. Caleb reached up to the drop ceiling, cheap acoustic tiles, easy to move. He pushed one aside, pulled himself up into the crawl space with the strength born of countless pull-ups, and moved across the metal framework like a spider. Below him, the guards muttered to each other. You see anything? Just red fog and my own paranoia. I don't like this. Feels wrong. Everything about this job feels wrong, but the pay's right. Caleb positioned himself above them, then reached down and pushed another ceiling tile loose. It fell with a clatter. Both guards spun toward the sound, rifles tracking. Caleb dropped behind them. His baton caught the first guard across the back of his knees, a sweep that sent the man crashing down. The second guard started to turn, but Caleb was already inside his guard, one hand redirecting the rifle barrel toward the floor, while his other hand drove the baton into the man's solar plexus. The guard folded with a wheeze. The first guard was recovering, reaching for his sidearm. Caleb kicked it away, then struck again, precise, controlled, non-lethal. These men might deserve worse, but that wasn't his call to make. Both guards went down and stayed down. More zip ties. More duct tape. 3 down. Caleb picked up one of the rifles, a civilian AR-15, nothing military grade but still deadly. He checked the magazine, cleared the chamber, and slung it across his back. Then he moved to Victoria's office door. It was ajar, light spilling through the crack. He could hear voices inside now, much clearer. Last chance, Mrs. Kane. We don't want to hurt you, but we will. The access codes for the Q-Series guidance protocols, all of them. A woman's voice, tight with pain but defiant. Go to hell. A sharp crack, the sound of flesh hitting flesh. Caleb's hand tightened on his baton. You think you're brave? That's just stubbornness. We can break that. We have chemicals in the van that'll make you tell us your childhood phone number, let alone some access codes. But that takes time, and we're on a schedule. So I'm going to ask you one more time. The answer is still the same. Victoria's voice was shaking now, but firm. Those codes access weapons systems. I give them to you, people die. So no. Never. Then we'll start with fingers. You're right-handed, correct? Let's see how well you type with... Caleb kicked the door open. The office was a war room, furniture overturned, paper scattered, Victoria Kane tied to her chair in the center of the space. Blood ran from her split lip, and her left eye was swelling shut. Around her stood 3 men in black tactical gear, their attention snapping to the doorway. For one frozen heartbeat, everyone stared at the man in the janitor's coveralls standing in the doorway with a rifle in one hand and a baton in the other. Then the leader, a man with a scarred face and cold blue eyes, smiled. You've got to be kidding me. Building maintenance? That's who's been screwing with us? Caleb recognized that voice, recognized that face, even with the new scars. Hello, Morrison. The smile faltered. Do I know you? Fallujah, 2007. You were running convoy security for Greystone. I was force recon. We worked that embassy extraction together. Recognition dawned in Morrison's eyes, followed by disbelief. Ward? Caleb Ward? They said you died. IED in Kandahar. Reports were exaggerated. So what the hell are you doing here dressed like you clean toilets? I do clean toilets. And right now I'm doing my job, keeping this building secure. Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless. Which means you and your friends need to leave. Now. Morrison laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. You always were an idealistic bastard. Still playing hero? Look around, Ward. You're one guy with a rifle you probably don't even know how to use anymore. We're 3 trained operators with a high-value asset. You're not walking out of here. But hey, for old time's sake, I'll make you a deal. Turn around, go back to your mop bucket, and forget you saw anything. We get what we came for. You stay alive. Everyone's happy. Except Mrs. Kane. She's not your problem. Actually, she signs my paychecks. That makes her exactly my problem. Morrison's smile vanished. Then you're an idiot. Take him. The other two guards moved, raising their weapons. Caleb moved faster. He threw the baton, a straight, hard throw that caught the nearest guard in the face, breaking his nose in a spray of blood. The man went down. In the same motion, Caleb brought up the rifle and fired twice. Not at the men, but at the floor in front of them, precision shots that sent splinters flying. The second guard jerked back, startled. That half-second was all Caleb needed. He closed the distance, using the rifle as a club to knock the guard's weapon aside, then drove his elbow into the man's throat. The guard made a choking sound and collapsed. Morrison was fast. Caleb had to give him that. His weapon came up smooth and professional. But he hesitated just for an instant because somewhere in his mind he still saw Caleb Ward as an ally, a brother in arms. Old loyalties died hard. Caleb didn't hesitate. He pivoted, his boot catching Morrison's wrist and sending the rifle clattering away. Then he was inside Morrison's guard, and it became a close-quarters fight. Brutal, efficient, no room for mercy. Morrison was good, better than good. He'd always been a killer, even back in their military days. He got in a solid punch that rocked Caleb's head back, then a knee that cracked against the body armor. But Caleb had spent 3 years doing quiet, humble work, staying invisible, tamping down everything he'd once been. And now, with violence permitted, with purpose clear, he felt all that compressed energy explode outward. He caught Morrison's next punch, twisted the arm, and used the momentum to drive Morrison face first into Victoria's desk. The wood cracked. Morrison slumped. Silence fell over the office, broken only by Caleb's controlled breathing and the soft hum of the building's systems. Victoria Kane stared at him from her chair, her one good eye wide with shock. "Who the hell are you?" Caleb moved to her side, pulling out his knife to cut her restraints. "Caleb Ward, ma'am. Night maintenance. Are you hurt?" Yes. No, I mean..." She struggled for words. "You're the janitor. I've seen you. You barely talk. You clean my office every night, and you barely even look at me, and now you just..." She gestured at the unconscious men scattered around her office. "What just happened?" "I heard your daughter was in distress. Seemed like a reasonable time to intervene." Caleb finished cutting the zip ties and helped her stand. Her hands were shaking. "Can you walk?" "I think so. My daughter, Ella. Is she..." "Safe. She's with security downstairs. Police should be here any minute. We need to move." But as Caleb helped Victoria toward the door, Morrison groaned behind them. Not unconscious, after all, just stunned. And his hand was moving toward the fallen rifle. Caleb saw it in his peripheral vision. He could shoot Morrison. Should shoot him, by every tactical calculation. The man was a threat. Would remain a threat. And Caleb had already crossed the line from civilian to combatant tonight. But he didn't. Instead, he kicked the rifle away and brought his boot down on Morrison's reaching hand. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to hurt. "Stay down," Caleb said quietly. "You lost. Don't make me finish it." Morrison looked up at him, blood running from his nose, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Still the same Ward? Too damn noble for your own good." "Just practical. Dead men draw investigations. Live prisoners close cases." "They'll kill me for this failure." "Then maybe you should choose better employers." Sirens were wailing in the distance now, growing louder. Backup had arrived. Caleb guided Victoria out of the office, through the dissipating mist, past the zip-tied guards, and toward the main elevators. Behind them, Morrison's radio crackled. "Boss? We got problems." "Position 2 isn't responding. Position 4 and 5 went dark. What's happening?" Morrison didn't answer. In the elevator, as they descended toward the main floor in safety and the army of flashing lights visible through the windows, Victoria finally found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. "No, you're not. But I think I'm starting to understand what your job really is." The elevator doors opened to chaos. Police officers, security personnel, paramedics. Someone pulled Victoria away toward an ambulance. Someone else tried to take Caleb's statement, but he was already moving, slipping through the crowd with the same forgettable efficiency he'd perfected over 3 years. Just another face, just another employee caught up in the crisis. He made it back to the maintenance closet, stowed his gear, and was pushing his cart down B-Wing when the first detective arrived on scene. By sunrise, the official reports would call it a failed corporate espionage attempt, thwarted by swift police response and brave resistance from the CEO. No mention would be made of the janitor and the security footage, just a maintenance worker going about his normal duties, wrong place at right time, nothing special, just how Caleb preferred it. But as he walked toward the exit and the morning shift began to arrive, he pulled out his phone and dialed Abby's number. "Daddy? Hey, baby girl, crisis averted. Come on home." "Did you help people?" Caleb looked back at the building, at the broken men being carried out in handcuffs, at Victoria Kane being loaded into an ambulance, alive because he'd remembered who he really was when it mattered. "Yeah," he said softly. "I helped people." "Good. That's what heroes do." "I'm not a hero, Abby. I'm just a guy who knows how to mop floors. And save people. And save people," he admitted. "Sometimes." He walked toward his car as the sun began to rise over Titan defense systems, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Another shift complete. Another night survived. And somewhere upstairs, Victoria Kane was already wondering about the impossible janitor who'd appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as fast, leaving only questions in his wake. But those questions could wait. Right now, Caleb had a daughter to hug and breakfast to make, and a perfectly normal, ordinary life to get back to. At least until the next time someone needed him. The coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but Caleb drank it anyway. He sat in his small kitchen 3 days after the incident, watching Abby draw elaborate pictures of castles and dragons at the table while morning light filtered through their apartment's single window. Mrs. Chen had returned her that first morning with questions in her eyes that she was too polite to ask. The news had reported an attempted robbery at Titan Defense Systems, several suspects in custody, CEO unharmed. Just another story in a city full of them. Abby looked up from her drawing, studying him with those too perceptive eyes that saw more than a 9-year-old should. "You have a bruise on your face." Caleb touched his cheekbone where Morrison's punch had landed. He'd covered most of it with makeup, but she was right. A shadow of purple still showed through. "Walked into a door at work. I was tired." "You're always tired after night shifts." She went back to coloring her dragon green. "Mrs. Chen says you work too hard." "Mrs. Chen worries too much. She says that's what neighbors do." Abby paused, her crayon hovering over the paper. "Daddy, are we going to have to move again?" The question hit him harder than Morrison's fist had. They'd moved 4 times in 3 years. Different cities, different names on the lease, different schools for Abby. Always running from the shadows of his past, from people who might recognize Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Ward and wonder why a decorated Marine was pushing a mop instead of collecting his pension. "Why would you ask that?" "Because we always move when something exciting happens. And something exciting happened at your work." Her voice was matter-of-fact, the tone of a child who'd learned to accept instability as normal. "I like this school, though. I finally have a friend." Caleb's chest tightened. "What friend?" "Her name's Ella. She's new, too. She told me her mom works at some big building and they live in a fancy apartment, but she's lonely because her dad died and her mom works all the time and—" Abby stopped, frowning. "Are you okay? You made a weird face." "Ella Kane." Of course, the universe had a sick sense of humor. Before Caleb could respond, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually bad news, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Ward?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Sarah Mitchell, executive assistant to Victoria Kane. Mrs. Kane would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. Would this afternoon be possible?" Caleb's first instinct was to refuse. He'd done his part. She was safe. End of story. Getting pulled deeper into Victoria Kane's world was the opposite of staying invisible. "I appreciate the call, but that's not necessary. I was just—" "Mr. Ward," Sarah's voice took on an edge. "Mrs. Kane doesn't make requests lightly, and she's quite insistent about thanking you properly. 2 o'clock at her office?" It wasn't really a question. "Fine. 2 o'clock. He hung up and found Abby watching him again. "Who was that?" "Work stuff. I have to go in this afternoon." "But it's your day off." "Boss wants to see me." "Are you in trouble?" Caleb managed a smile. No, baby girl, I think it might be the opposite. That afternoon, Caleb stood in the lobby of Titan Defense Systems feeling distinctly out of place in the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have paint stains on it. The building looked different in daylight, less like a battlefield, more like what it actually was, a monument to American military innovation, all glass and steel and patriotic ambition. The elevator ride to the executive floor was surreal. He'd climbed the same shaft 3 nights ago in the dark. Now he was riding up like a regular visitor, watching the numbers tick upward while soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Sarah Mitchell met him on the 7th floor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an efficient smile. "Mr. Ward, thank you for coming. Mrs. Kane is expecting you." She led him through corridors he'd only ever seen empty and dark. During business hours, they bustled with activity, engineers in casual clothes, executives in suits, administrative staff moving between offices with tablets and coffee cups. Several people glanced at him curiously. He recognized a few from his night shifts, but none of them recognized him. The janitor was invisible, even in daylight. Victoria Kane's office had been restored to order. The broken desk replaced, the scattered papers filed away. No sign of the violence that had occurred here, except for fresh paint on one wall. Victoria herself sat behind her new desk, her face still showing the aftermath of that night, her split lip healing, her black eye faded to yellow-green, but her posture straight and her gaze direct. "Mr. Ward, please sit down." Caleb sat in the leather chair across from her, conscious of how expensive everything in this room probably was. His entire year's salary wouldn't cover the desk alone. Victoria studied him for a long moment. "I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure you out. I had my security team pull your employment file. Caleb James Ward, age 38, hired 3 years ago. Background check came back clean. Previous employment at various maintenance and janitorial firms. No criminal record, no military service listed." She paused. "That last part is interesting, don't you think?" Caleb kept his expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am." "Don't." Her voice sharpened. "Don't insult my intelligence. The man who saved my life wasn't a janitor. The way you moved, the way you fought, the tactical decisions you made, that was military training. High-level military training. And when one of those men called you by name, he mentioned Fallujah and Force Recon." She leaned forward. "So let's skip the part where you pretend to be just a maintenance worker and move to the part where you tell me why a former Marine is hiding behind a mop bucket." Caleb considered his options. He could lie. He could walk out. Or he could trust that the woman who'd refused to give up weapons codes under torture might understand why a man would want to disappear. "Force reconnaissance," he said quietly. 3 tours. Iraq and Afghanistan. Some other places that don't officially exist. I got out 6 years ago with a silver star and enough nightmares to fill a library. Came home to find my wife had decided she preferred the idea of a war hero to the reality of damaged goods. She left. Took our daughter for about 6 months before the courts gave me custody because she'd gotten into some things she shouldn't have. Pills, mostly. I spent a year trying to live a normal life under my real name and found out that being a decorated veteran attracts the wrong kind of attention. What kind of attention? The kind that doesn't understand why you'd rather work a quiet job than hire yourself out as a private contractor. The kind that shows up at your apartment wanting you to train their militia or consult on their security firm or share classified information for the right price. Caleb's jaw tightened. I had a daughter to raise. She'd already lost one parent to poor decisions. I wasn't going to let my past destroy her future, so I became someone else. Someone boring, someone forgettable. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded slowly. I understand the impulse, but you can't hide forever. You proved that 3 nights ago. That was an exception. Was it? Or was it inevitable? She stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city. I've been thinking about something Morrison said before you arrived. He mentioned pain compliance and chemical interrogation. Do you know what would have happened if you hadn't intervened? You would have given them the codes. Eventually, yes. And those codes access the guidance systems for autonomous defense drones, technology that could be weaponized by whoever paid Morrison's employers, which, according to the FBI, was a foreign government with very unfriendly intentions toward American interests. She turned back to him. So your exception potentially saved thousands of lives. Maybe more. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to help a scared kid find her mom. My daughter told me what you said to her, that you asked tactical questions instead of panicking, that you sent her to safety and went toward danger without hesitation. Ella's smart enough to recognize something special when she sees it. Victoria returned to her desk, which brings me to why I asked you here. I have a proposal. Ma'am, if this is about a reward, it's about a job. Chief of Security for Titan Defense Systems. Full benefits, salary of $150 to start with performance bonuses, health insurance that covers everything including therapy if you want it, and a schedule that lets you actually see your daughter grow up. Day shifts, nights off, weekends free. The offer hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Caleb's mind raced. A legitimate job, real money, a chance to use his skills without hiding them. It was everything he'd given up when he chose invisibility, and that was exactly the problem. I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Kane, but I can't accept it. Why not? Because being chief of security means being visible. It means people knowing my name, my face, my background. It means everything I've spent 3 years running from. Or, Victoria said carefully, it means finally standing still. You can't run forever, Mr. Ward. Eventually, your daughter is going to ask why you're not using your considerable talents for something more than scrubbing floors. What are you going to tell her? The question cut deep because Caleb had been asking himself the same thing. Abby was getting older, asking harder questions, noticing more. How long before she Googled her father's name and found nothing? How long before she realized that normal dads didn't teach their 9-year-olds evasion techniques and safe room protocols? I need to think about it. Of course. Take a week. Victoria pulled a business card from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. My private number. Call anytime, day or night. And Mr. Ward? Thank you. For my life and for my daughter's peace of mind. That debt isn't something I'll forget. Caleb took the card and stood to leave. At the door, he paused. The men who hired Morrison. Did the FBI identify them? Not yet. Morrison's not talking, but they will. Eventually. She met his eyes. Does that worry you? It should worry you. People who can afford that level of operation don't stop after one failure. They adapt. They come back harder. Then I guess I need someone who knows how to stop them. Victoria smiled slightly. Think about it. The walk back through the building felt different now. Caleb caught himself analyzing sightlines, checking camera angles, noting vulnerable access points. Old instincts stirring again, whispering that this place needed better security, that he could fix it, that he could make a difference. He was still wrestling with those thoughts when he picked Abby up from school that afternoon. She bounced into the car with her backpack trailing, her face bright with excitement. Guess what? Ella invited me to her house for a play date. Can I go, please? Her mom said it's okay, and she's really nice, and they have a huge apartment with an actual library and— Slow down. Caleb pulled into traffic, his mind already making connections he didn't want to make. When? This Saturday. Please, Dad. I never get to do normal kid stuff. The plea hit him square in the chest. She was right. Between his paranoid security measures and their constant moving, Abby had missed out on so much normal childhood. Birthday parties she couldn't attend because he didn't trust the locations. Sleepovers he'd refuse because he couldn't vet the parents. Play dates that never happened because getting close to people meant they might ask questions. I'll think about it. That's what you always say when you mean no. Abby's voice went small. I just want one friend, Dad. Just one normal thing. Caleb glanced at her in the rearview mirror and saw his daughter's eyes shining with unshed tears. 9 years old and already learning that her father's past meant her present was limited. Okay, he heard himself say. I'll call Ella's mom and arrange it. The smile that lit up Abby's face was worth every risk. That night, after Abby was asleep, Caleb sat on his tiny balcony with a beer he wasn't drinking and Victoria Kane's business card in his hand. The city sprawled below him, 1,000 lights marking 1,000 lives he'd never touch. Invisible man in an invisible apartment, raising a daughter who deserved better. His phone rang. Unknown number again, but a different one this time. Ward. He answered out of habit, the military curtness he'd tried to abandon. Still using that voice, I see. The voice on the other end was female, amused, and painfully familiar. "Hello, Gunny. Been a long time." Every muscle in Caleb's body went rigid. "Reeves." "Oh, good, you remember. I was worried 3 years of janitor cosplay might have erased your memory." Captain Diana Reeves, formerly his commanding officer, currently working somewhere in the shadowy space between military intelligence and civilian oversight. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. Because your little adventure at Titan Defense Systems 3 nights ago pinged about 17 different watch lists. You're not as invisible as you think, Ward." Caleb's hand tightened on the phone. "I haven't done anything illegal." "No, but you've done something interesting. And interesting draws attention. The kind of attention you've been avoiding." Papers rustled on her end. "Morrison's talking, by the way. Not to the FBI. They're amateurs. He's talking to people who know how to ask questions properly, and he's told them about you." "So what?" "So the people who hired Morrison are now very curious about the janitor who took down 6 armed contractors single-handed. They're asking questions, running searches. Eventually, they're going to find out who you really are, and when they do, they're going to wonder why a Force Recon Marine is hiding in plain sight. They're going to assume you're undercover, working for someone, which makes you a threat." The beer suddenly seemed like a good idea after all. Caleb took a long drink. "What do you want, Reeves?" "Yeah. Same thing I've always wanted. For good people to stay alive and bad people to fail. Right now you're at an intersection where those 2 goals collide." She paused. "Victoria Kane offered you a job. Take it." "You're monitoring her communications?" "We're monitoring everything related to her defense contracts. The woman has access to technology that could change modern warfare. Of course we're watching her." Reeves' tone softened slightly. "But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because you have a daughter who deserves a father that doesn't jump at shadows. You have a chance to stop running and start building something real. Don't waste it because you're afraid." "I'm not afraid." "Yes, you are. You've been afraid since you came home and realized the war doesn't end just because you leave the battlefield. But here's the thing, Gunny. Fear is just another kind of camouflage. Effective in the short term, fatal in the long term. Eventually you have to show yourself or you suffocate." Caleb stared at the business card in his hand. "If I take this job, I'm a target." "You're already a target. You just don't have resources to defend yourself yet. Take the job. Use the position. Build something that matters. And when the people who hired Morrison come back, because they will come back, you'll be ready." "You seem very certain they'll come back." "Because I know who hired them, and they don't accept failure." Reeves's voice went hard. "There's a storm coming, Ward. You can hide from it or you can prepare for it, but you can't avoid it. Not anymore." The line went dead. Caleb sat in the darkness for a long time, turning the business card over in his fingers. Every instinct screamed at him to pack up, grab Abby, disappear into another city with another name. It's what he'd done before. It's what kept them safe. But safe wasn't the same as living. And Abby's tearful voice echoed in his mind. "I just want one friend, Dad. Just one normal thing." He pulled out his phone and dialed before he could change his mind. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Mr. Ward, I was hoping you'd call. The job, I have conditions." "Name them." "My daughter's safety is non-negotiable. If this position puts her at risk, I walk. No questions, no notice." "Agreed. What else?" "I run security my way. No interference from the board, no corporate politics. If I say something's a threat, it gets treated as a threat." "Done. Anything else?" Caleb took a breath. "I need you to understand what you're getting. I'm not a corporate security guy who checks badges and monitors cameras. I'm a weapon that learned how to blend in. You're asking me to stop blending. That means the people I've been hiding from will find me, and when they do, they might come through you to get to me." There was a pause. Then Victoria's voice came back, steady and certain. "Mr. Ward, 3 nights ago, 6 trained men broke into my building, beat me unconscious, and threatened to torture me for classified information. You stopped them with cleaning supplies and improvised tactics. I don't need a corporate security guy. I need exactly what you are. So yes, I understand the risks. And yes, I'm still offering the job. Then I accept." Excellent. Report Monday morning, 8 a.m. We'll handle all the paperwork, including updating your official background. I have lawyers who are very good at creating documentation that satisfies HR without revealing details you'd prefer kept quiet. Thank you, Mrs. Kane. Victoria, if you're going to be my chief of security, we should probably be on a first-name basis. And Mr. Ward? Caleb. Caleb. My daughter told me yours is named Abby. Why don't both girls come to my apartment Saturday afternoon? Ella could use a friend, and I suspect we could both use some adult conversation that doesn't involve tactical analysis. It was so normal, so domestic, so far from anything Caleb had allowed himself in 3 years that he almost laughed. That sounds good. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see my security setup. It's going to give you nightmares from a professional standpoint. This time Caleb did laugh. Looking forward to it. He ended the call and sat back, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, necessary hope. Inside the apartment, Abby stirred in her sleep, calling out softly for him. Caleb went to her room and found her tangled in blankets, still clutching that ridiculous stuffed rabbit. Daddy? I'm here, baby girl. Did you decide about the play date? Yeah, we're going Saturday. You and Ella can hang out while I talk boring grown-up stuff with her mom. Abby's sleepy smile was radiant. Really? Promise? Promise. She settled back into sleep, content. Caleb stayed for a moment, watching her breathe, thinking about the choice he'd just made. Captain Reeves was right. A storm was coming. But for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't planning to run from it. He was planning to fight. Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow. Caleb stood in his apartment, adjusting a tie he'd had to YouTube how to knot properly, feeling like an imposter in business casual. Abby watched from the couch, eating cereal and grinning. You look weird, she announced. Thank you for that assessment. I mean, weird good, like a real dad from TV. As opposed to a fake dad from where? You know what I mean. She set down her bowl. Are you scared? The question surprised him. A little. Why? Because you're making your scared face, the one where your eyes get really still and you're thinking too much. Too perceptive by half, this kid. It's a big change, that's all. I want to do it right. You will. You do everything right. Sometimes too right. Mom used to say... She stopped, looking down. What did she used to say? That you couldn't let yourself make mistakes because you were always on duty, even at home. Abby looked up at him, suddenly older than 9. But it's okay to make mistakes, Dad. That's what Mrs. Chen says. That's how people learn. Caleb crossed to the couch and pulled her into a hug. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen because you're busy protecting me from stuff. That's my job. No, your job is going to that building and being in charge of security stuff. Your dad's job is to let me grow up a little. She pulled back and poked him in the chest. So go to work. Let me be a normal kid. And stop making the scared face. He kissed the top of her head. Deal. The drive to Titan Defense Systems felt different now. Not a place he had to sneak through in darkness, but a place he belonged in daylight. He parked in the executive lot, his name already on a reserved spot, which felt surreal, and walked through the main entrance where he'd pushed his cleaning cart 1,000 times. The security guard at the desk did a double take. Mr. Ward? Damn, man, you clean up nice. Heard you got promoted. Congrats. Thanks, Marcus. We still on for basketball Thursday? Wouldn't miss it. The exchange was so normal, so ordinary, that Caleb felt some of his tension ease. Maybe he could do this. Maybe visible didn't have to mean vulnerable. Victoria met him in her office with Sarah Mitchell and another man, late 50s, military bearing, sharp eyes that assessed Caleb in one sweep. Caleb, this is Colonel James Hartley, retired. He's been consulting on our security infrastructure. James, this is Caleb Ward, our new chief of security. Hartley extended his hand. Mr. Ward, I've heard interesting things. His grip was firm, professional, but his eyes said he knew more than Victoria had told him. Caleb recognized the look. It was how intelligence officers examined assets they weren't sure they could trust. Colonel, just James now. I hung up the uniform 5 years ago. He gestured to a tablet on the conference table. Shall we discuss what you're inheriting? because frankly, it's a disaster waiting to happen. The next 2 hours were a crash course in everything wrong with Titan Defense Systems security. Outdated camera systems, access protocols that hadn't been updated in 3 years, server rooms with insufficient physical protection, and most damning, a corporate culture that treated security as an inconvenience rather than a necessity. The previous chief of security retired 6 months ago, Victoria explained. We've been operating with a patchwork system since then. It's part of why Morrison's team got as far as they did. Caleb studied the facility blueprint spread across the table. You need a complete overhaul, new cameras with facial recognition, biometric access on all sensitive areas, armed response team, not just monitoring, and someone needs to talk to your engineers about operational security because half of them post about classified projects on their personal social media. James nodded approvingly. My assessment exactly. Victoria, he's going to need a budget. How much? Caleb did quick mental math. $2 million for infrastructure upgrades, another $1 million annually for personnel and training, and I'll need to hire a team I can trust. Victoria didn't blink. Done. James will help you navigate the procurement process. Sarah will handle HR logistics. I want a full security audit on my desk by Friday and implementation plans the following week. That's aggressive. Morrison's employers are still out there. They paid a lot of money for information they didn't get. I'm not giving them a second chance. Victoria's expression was steel. Whatever you need, you get. No bureaucracy, no delays. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Victoria. She smiled slightly. Now, the real reason I brought James in today. He has connections throughout the private military contractor world. If you need personnel with specific skill sets, he can help vet them. People you can trust. Caleb looked at the older man more carefully. You know who I am, my real background. I know enough. Diana Reeves and I go back 20 years. She called me, explained the situation, asked me to help smooth your transition. James's expression was unreadable. Your secret's safe with me, Ward, but you should know, you're not the only ghost working in corporate America. There are a lot of us trying to build normal lives after serving in places that don't officially exist. Sometimes the best security comes from people who understand what real threats look like. It was an offer of alliance, carefully coded. Caleb nodded slowly. I appreciate that. Good. Then let's get to work. They spent the rest of the day buried in logistics, reviewing personnel files, analyzing threat assessments, planning security upgrades. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, Caleb's head was spinning with information, and his body remembered why desk jobs were exhausting in their own way. But when he left the building and drove toward Abby's school to pick her up, he felt something unfamiliar, satisfaction, purpose, the sense that he was building something that mattered instead of just hiding from things that scared him. Abby bounced into the car full of news about her day, and as Caleb listened to her chatter about math tests and playground drama, he realized how much lighter she seemed. No more worried glances, no more careful questions about whether they had to move again. Just a kid being a kid, finally. Oh, Abby exclaimed suddenly. I forgot to tell you, Ella's mom called Mrs. Chen and confirmed Saturday. We're going to their apartment at 2 o'clock. Ella says they have a whole room just for games and movies. Can you believe that? A whole room. Sounds pretty amazing. Are you nervous? About seeing Ella's mom again? The question caught him off guard. Why would I be nervous? Because Abby gave him that look, the one that said she knew things she wasn't saying. Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups who helped each other see each other again, sometimes they get nervous because they don't know if they'll still like each other outside of the emergency situation. Mrs. Chen needs to stop watching so many rom-coms. That's what I told her, but she says life is like a rom-com sometimes, which I think is weird because rom-coms don't usually have bad guys with guns. True. Saturday afternoon found Caleb standing outside Victoria Kane's residential tower with a nervous daughter and a bottle of wine he'd spent 20 minutes selecting at the store. The building was even more impressive up close, 30 floors of glass and steel that screamed money and success, with a doorman who looked like he could moonlight as Secret Service. Mr. Ward and Miss Ward for Mrs. Kane, Caleb told him. The doorman checked his tablet and smiled. Of course. Penthouse level. I'll let her know you're on your way up. The elevator was the kind with mirrors on all sides, forcing Caleb to confront multiple versions of himself looking uncomfortable in khakis and a button-down. Abby, meanwhile, practically vibrated with excitement. "Remember," Caleb said as they ascended, "best behavior. No running unless Ella's mom says it's okay. No touching things that look expensive, which is probably everything." "Dad, I know how to act." Abby rolled her eyes. "I'm not 5. Just making sure." The elevator opened directly into Victoria's penthouse. No hallway, no other apartments, just straight into a foyer that was bigger than Caleb's entire apartment. Ella appeared immediately, squealing as she saw Abby. "You came! Come on! I want to show you my room and the game room, and we have every streaming service, and Mom said we could order pizza later," and the girls disappeared in a whirlwind of excited chatter, leaving Caleb standing alone with his wine bottle, feeling suddenly very exposed. Then Victoria emerged from what looked like a kitchen, wearing jeans and a casual sweater that made her seem more human than the CEO he'd met in her office. "Caleb, welcome." She noticed the wine and smiled. "You didn't have to bring anything. My mom raised me right. Never show up empty-handed." Well, she did a good job. Victoria took the bottle and led him into an open-concept living space that could have been featured in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while tasteful furniture arranged in conversation clusters somehow made the massive space feel almost cozy. "The girls will be entertained for hours. I set up the game room with enough snacks and activities to survive a siege." "Good planning." "I learned from the best." She gestured to the couch. "Sit, please. Can I get you something? Coffee, beer, or we could open this wine?" "Beer works if you have it." She returned with 2 bottles, craft IPA, the good kind, and settled into the chair across from him. For a moment they just sat in slightly awkward silence, 2 people who'd shared an intense trauma but didn't really know each other outside of it. "So," Victoria said finally, "how was your first week as chief of security?" "Overwhelming, eye-opening. Your previous security setup was basically held together with duct tape and optimism." "That bad?" "Worse. I found 6 major vulnerabilities Morrison's team could have exploited if they'd done any reconnaissance. Your server room has a door lock from 1995. Half your cameras have blind spots big enough to drive a truck through. And don't get me started on your badge access system." Victoria winced. "James warned me it was bad." "It's fixable. But it's going to cost money and cause inconvenience. People hate both those things." "People can learn to deal with it." She took a drink. "You're already making waves, you know. Sarah told me 3 department heads complained about your new access protocols. Let me guess. Engineering, R&D, and executive management." "How did you know?" "Because those are the departments that think security is an obstacle to productivity rather than the thing that keeps them alive to be productive." Caleb leaned back. "I'm going to make more people unhappy before this is done. If that's a problem..." "It's not." Victoria's voice was firm. "I hired you to keep this company secure, not to win popularity contests. Do what needs to be done. Even if it means treating some VPs like security risks." "Especially then. Some of my executives think their title makes them exempt from protocols. Disabuse them of that notion." Caleb smiled despite himself. "Yes, ma'am." "Victoria." "Right. Victoria." Comfortable silence settled between them, broken by distant sounds of the girls laughing in another room. Victoria glanced toward the sound, her expression softening. "Ella hasn't been this happy in months. Maybe longer. Since her father died, she's been withdrawn, scared of everything, nightmares every night. But ever since that night, since she met Abby somehow through all that chaos, she's been different, lighter. Abby's the same way. She's never had close friends because we moved too much. I was too paranoid to let her get attached to anyone." Caleb stared at his beer bottle. "Turns out kids need more than a paranoid father keeping them safe. They need actual lives." "You were protecting her." "I was isolating her. There's a difference I'm only just figuring out." Victoria studied him with those sharp CEO eyes that missed nothing. "Ella told me something interesting. She said she and Abby met before Saturday's playdate, that they'd been talking to each other somehow." Caleb's blood went cold. "What?" Apparently, Ella has a radio, some old emergency broadcast device her father gave her before he died. She was playing with it that night, the night of the attack, and she heard another voice, a girl her age who couldn't sleep because her dad was at work. Victoria's expression was unreadable. Abby, I presume. There was no point denying it. Caleb had given Abby that emergency radio 2 years ago, programmed to a frequency he monitored from work, a way for her to reach him if something went wrong. He'd never imagined she'd use it to make a friend. I didn't know, he said quietly, about them talking. I figured, but it explained some things. Why Ella ran to you specifically that night, why she trusted you immediately. She'd been talking to your daughter for weeks, apparently, and Abby had mentioned you. The dad who worked nights and worried too much and checked all the locks 3 times before bed. That's embarrassing. That's honest. Kids see things clearly sometimes. Victoria paused. Ella also mentioned that Abby told her not to be scared because her dad always helped people who needed help, that it was what heroes did. I'm not a hero. You keep saying that, but my daughter would disagree. So would I. Victoria set down her beer. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on how personal. Fair enough. What made you come out of hiding? Really? Because I know it wasn't just my job offer. Caleb considered deflecting, then remembered what Abby had said about mistakes being how people learned. Maybe honesty was how people connected. I was killing both of us with safety. Abby couldn't be a kid because I was too busy being a soldier. I couldn't be a father because I was too busy hiding from my past. When she cried about wanting just one friend, I realized I'd become the threat I was protecting her from. Not physically, but emotionally. So I decided to stop running. He met Victoria's eyes. Your job offer gave me the excuse, but Abby gave me the reason. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand that. After Michael died, my husband, I threw myself into work. Told myself I was providing for Ella, building her future, honoring her father's memory. Really, I was just avoiding the grief, avoiding being present for the daughter who needed me. It took almost getting killed for me to wake up. We're both pretty good at lying to ourselves. Seems like it. She smiled slightly. But we're trying to do better. That counts for something. Laughter exploded from the game room, followed by Ella shouting, "That's cheating!" And Abby's indignant response, "Is not! That's strategy." Should we intervene? Caleb asked. Probably not. Let them figure it out. Conflict resolution is a life skill. Fair point. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as afternoon faded toward evening. It felt surreal, sitting in a penthouse worth millions, drinking beer with a CEO, listening to their daughters become friends. A month ago, Caleb would have dismissed this scenario as impossible. Now, it felt almost natural. I got a call from FBI this week, Victoria said eventually. Morrison's employers have been identified. Sort of. Caleb's attention sharpened. Sort of? They're using shell corporations and offshore accounts, but the investigation tracked the money back to a private military company called Nightfall Solutions. Ever heard of them? No, but that doesn't mean much. The PMC world is full of companies that exist on paper for one contract then disappear. Caleb frowned. What does the FBI know about them? Not much. They operate primarily in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Officially, they provide security consulting. Unofficially, Victoria hesitated. The FBI thinks they're mercenaries for hire. Corporate espionage, asset extraction, occasionally worse things, and they don't take kindly to failure. You think they'll try again? The FBI thinks it's possible. I think it's probable. She turned to face him directly. Which is why I need to know if you're really in, Caleb, because accepting my job offer means accepting the risks that come with it, and those risks don't stop at the office door. Caleb thought about Captain Reeves' warning, about Morrison's eyes when he'd recognized him, about the way threats metastasized when left unchecked. I'm in, he said. But we need to be smart about this. Nightfall Solutions will have done their homework by now. They'll know Morrison failed because of me. They'll want to know who I am and whether I'm a threat to their future operations. Are you? If they come after you or this company again? Absolutely. Victoria's smile was fierce. Good. Then let's make sure we're ready for them. They spent the next hour discussing security upgrades in more detail. Things Caleb hadn't wanted to mention in the office where walls had ears. He explained his plan for a rapid response team, pulled from former military with actual combat experience. He outlined new protocols for executive protection, supply chain security, and information warfare. Victoria listened with the focus of someone who understood that survival required preparation, then started making notes on her tablet. This level of security is going to change how the company operates, she said. Some people won't like it. Some people didn't like seatbelts either. Then they saved enough lives that objections stopped mattering. Point taken. She glanced up. What about your daughter? What kind of security does she need? The question caught Caleb off guard. Why would Abby need... Because if Nightfall Solutions digs into your background, they'll find her. And if they want leverage against you, she's the obvious target. Victoria's expression was serious. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be realistic. We need to protect both our daughters. She was right, and Caleb hated that she was right. He'd spent 3 years keeping Abby anonymous and safe through invisibility. Now that he'd chosen visibility, all those precautions were evaporating. What are you suggesting? Upgraded security at her school, monitoring for anyone showing unusual interest in her, maybe some basic safety training so she knows what to watch for. Victoria paused. And maybe it makes sense for our families to stay connected. Safety in numbers. The girls are friends anyway. We might as well leverage that. Caleb studied her carefully. You're not just talking about playdates, are you? I'm talking about alliance. You protect my company and my daughter. I use my resources to help protect yours. We watch each other's backs. Victoria met his eyes steadily. I know that's asking for trust you probably don't give easily, but I think we're past the point of half measures. She was offering partnership, real partnership, the kind that required vulnerability from both sides. Every instinct Caleb had developed over 3 years of hiding screamed at him to refuse, to keep his distance, to maintain operational security by trusting no one. But those instincts had also kept him pushing a mop while his daughter cried about not having friends. Okay, he said, alliance. But that means complete honesty between us. No corporate spin, no polite deflection. If something threatens either of our kids, we talk about it immediately. Agreed. Victoria extended her hand. Partners? Caleb shook it. Partners. The moment would have been more dramatic if Abby hadn't chosen that exact second to come running into the living room, Ella close behind. Dad, Ella says they have a whole gym in this building with a pool and everything. Can we go swimming, please? Caleb looked at Victoria, who shrugged. I did tell them we had amenities. The pool is open until 9. I didn't bring swimsuits. I have extras, Ella chimed in. Mom always keeps extras for guests because people forget. That's what she says. People always forget. The girls looked at them with matching expressions of desperate hope. Caleb felt his resistance crumbling. Fine, but only if you both promise to follow the pool rules and no diving unless there's a lifeguard present. The girls squealed and ran off to find swimsuits. Victoria laughed. You're a softer touch than you pretend to be. Don't spread that around. It'll ruin my reputation. They took the girls down to the building's pool facility, a pristine space with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough luxury to make a country club jealous. Ella and Abby immediately jumped in the shallow end, splashing and laughing with the unself-conscious joy of kids who'd found their person. Caleb and Victoria sat in the lounge chairs, ostensibly supervising but really just watching their daughters be happy. It's nice, isn't it? Victoria said quietly. Seeing them like this. Yeah, it really is. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to echoing laughter and splashing water. It was the most normal Caleb had felt in years. Just a dad at a pool, watching his kids swim, no threats imminent, no need to check exits or assess strangers. Just normal. Then his phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Enjoying the pool? Your daughter is beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Caleb's blood turned to ice. He was on his feet instantly, scanning the pool area, every sense screaming danger. Victoria noticed his reaction and stood as well. What's wrong? Get the girls out, now. His voice carried command authority that Victoria didn't question. She moved to the pool edge. Girls, time to go, right now, please. But we just got here, Ella protested. Now, Ella, move. Something in Victoria's tone made both girls scramble out of the pool without further argument. Caleb was already moving through the facility, checking the locker rooms, the equipment closet, the viewing gallery. Nothing. No one. But someone had been here. Someone had seen them. Someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. By the time he returned to the pool area, Victoria had the girls wrapped in towels and heading toward the elevator. Her face was pale, but controlled. "Back to the apartment," Caleb said quietly. "I'll do a sweep before we leave." "What happened?" He showed her the text message. Victoria's jaw tightened. Nightfall? Or someone working for them, testing our defenses, letting us know they can reach us whenever they want. What do we do? We don't panic. We don't change our routine drastically because that tells them they got to us. But we do upgrade security immediately. Caleb was already texting James Hartley. "I'm calling in favors. By tomorrow morning, this building will have a security presence that makes Fort Knox look casual." They rode the elevator back to the penthouse in tense silence, the girls sensing something was wrong but not asking questions. Once inside, Victoria took them to Ella's room with instructions to stay there and watch a movie. "I'm sorry," Caleb said once the girls were out of earshot. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. They got to Abby because of me. They got to all of us because they're professionals who don't accept failure." Victoria's voice was firm. "This isn't your fault, Caleb. This is what we discussed, the reality we're dealing with. The question is how we respond." Caleb's phone rang. James Hartley. "I got your text. Talk to me." "Threat against my daughter. Message delivered while we were at Victoria's building. Unknown number, untraceable. Someone was watching us." "Surveillance or active threat?" "Unclear. But they made contact, which means they're in the provocation phase. Testing responses." "Agreed. I'm activating a team. Give me 2 hours to have people in place." James paused. "Ward, this is exactly what we prepared for. Don't let fear make you sloppy." "Copy that." "And Caleb, welcome back to the war. Sorry it found you anyway." The line went dead. Caleb stood in Victoria's penthouse living room, looking out at the city and thinking about how quickly safety could become illusion. He'd spent 3 years hiding, and it had bought him exactly nothing. The war had found him anyway, just like James said. Victoria touched his arm. "Hey, we're going to handle this. You shouldn't have to handle this. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment they broke into my building and tried to steal my technology. You just helped me survive it." She moved to stand beside him at the window. "We're stronger together, Caleb. That's the whole point of alliance. So stop trying to shoulder this alone." He wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that her best move was to fire him, distance herself, let him disappear back into anonymity. But he thought about Abby laughing in the pool, about Ella's joy at having a friend, about the possibility of building something real instead of just hiding from shadows. "Okay," he said, "together. But we do this smart. No unnecessary risks, no cowboy heroics. We use resources, we use intelligence, and we don't give them any openings." "Sounds like a plan." Caleb's phone buzzed again. Another text, same unknown number. "Tell Kane we'll be in touch. The girl was just a reminder that we can reach anyone, anytime. Next time it won't be a text message." He showed Victoria. Her face went hard. "They're going to regret threatening our children." "Yes," Caleb agreed. "They really are." The girls emerged from Ella's room eventually, Abby yawning. "Dad, can we stay longer? We're watching a movie and it's not even over." Caleb checked his watch. 7 p.m. James had said 2 hours for his team to arrive. Safer to stay here where backup was coming than to move Abby through potentially surveilled streets. "Tell you what, how about you have a sleepover here? I'll run home and get your stuff, come back and camp out on Mrs. Kane's very comfortable couch." "Really?" Abby's face lit up. "My first sleepover ever?" "If it's okay with Mrs. Kane." "It's okay with Victoria," Victoria said firmly. "And I insist. The guest room has twin beds. The girls will be thrilled." They were more than thrilled. They were ecstatic. Caleb left 30 minutes later after checking every lock, testing every alarm, and making Victoria promise not to open the door for anyone except him or James's team. The drive to his apartment took 15 minutes, during which Caleb's training kept his eyes on mirrors, checking for tails, noting vehicles that appeared more than once. Nothing obvious, but that meant nothing. Professionals didn't tail, obviously. His apartment looked exactly as he'd left it, but Caleb had spent enough years in hostile territory to trust his instincts. Something felt wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not ransacked room wrong, but the kind of subtle wrong that meant someone had been here. He cleared each room methodically, hand on the knife he'd started carrying again, finding nothing. But in Abby's room, the stuffed rabbit was facing the wrong direction. In the kitchen, his coffee mug had been moved 2 inches to the left. In his bedroom, the closet door stood open when he always kept it closed. Someone had been here. Someone wanted him to know they'd been here. Caleb pulled out his phone and took pictures of everything, documenting the violations. Then he packed Abby's overnight bag with hands that didn't shake despite the rage building in his chest. They'd come into his home, into his daughter's space, that crossed lines that had consequences. His phone rang as he was locking up. "Captain Reeves, you need to get out of that apartment," she said without preamble. "Right now." "Already leaving? How did you Because I've been monitoring Nightfall's communications since Morrison was arrested, and they just lit up with chatter about activating a local asset for a demonstration of capability." "Caleb, they're not playing games anymore. Get to Victoria Kane's location and stay there. James has a team en route." "What kind of demonstration?" "The kind that sends messages. Buildings catch fire. Cars have accidents. People go missing." Reeves's voice was tight. "I'm working on getting you federal protection, but that takes time and bureaucracy. Until then, you're on your own, so don't be alone." "Copy that." "And Caleb, it might be time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. These people respond to strength, not fear." The line went dead before he could respond. Caleb took the stairs instead of the elevator, harder to trap someone in a stairwell, and emerged into the parking garage with every sense on high alert. His car looked untouched, but he checked it anyway. Wheel wells, undercarriage, engine compartment. Nothing. He got in, started the engine, and pulled out carefully, watching for the explosion that didn't come. He was 3 blocks from Victoria's building when the car behind him started getting aggressive. Closer following, matching his turns, boxing him in against traffic. Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what you've got." He made a sudden right turn down a side street. The car followed. Another turn, this one into an alley behind a closed shopping center. The car followed again, and now Caleb could see 2 figures inside, both male, both large. The alley dead-ended at a loading dock. Perfect. Caleb stopped the car and got out, Abby's bag slung over his shoulder, his knife in his pocket, and his phone recording video in his jacket. The other car stopped 30 feet back. Both doors opened. The men who emerged were professionals, military bearing, controlled movement, scanning for threats even as they approached. Ex-special forces. Caleb's experienced eye told him. Probably Nightfall contractors. "Mr. Ward," the first one called out. "We just want to talk." Funny way of starting a conversation, following someone, invading their home, threatening their daughter. "Just business, nothing personal." "It's very personal when you involve my kid." The second man shifted position, trying to flank him. Caleb tracked the movement without obvious acknowledgement, calculating angles and distances. "Our employer wants to make you an offer," the first man continued. "Good money for someone with your skills, better than babysitting corporate executives." "Not interested." "You should be, because the alternative is that you become a problem that needs solving, and we're very good at solving problems." Caleb smiled without humor. "So am I." The tension ratcheted up another notch. Both men's hands drifted toward their waistbands where weapons likely waited. "Last chance, Ward. Take the job or take the consequences." "I've got a better idea. You go back to whoever sent you and deliver a message. Tell them that Caleb Ward isn't hiding anymore. Tell them that if they come after my daughter, my friends, or my employer again, I won't just defend, I'll hunt. And I'm very good at hunting." The first man laughed. "Big talk for one guy in an alley." "Not just one guy." Headlights blazed from behind the contractor's car as 3 vehicles blocked the alley exit. Doors opened and 6 figures emerged. James Hartley's rapid response team, armed and ready. The contractors realized too late they'd been had. James himself stepped forward, his voice carrying command authority. "Gentlemen, you're trespassing on private property and engaging in criminal harassment. The police have been called. I suggest you leave while you still can. The contractors looked at each other, calculating odds that had suddenly turned very bad. Then they retreated to their car and drove off, James's team parting to let them through while recording license plates and faces. James walked over to Caleb. You used yourself as bait. Seemed like a good way to make them show their hand. It was reckless. It was effective. Caleb looked at the older man. How did you know where to find me? Your phone has a tracker that Victoria authorized for security purposes. When you left her building, I had my team follow at a distance. James's expression was approving despite his words. Not bad for your first week back in the game. Thanks for the backup. That's what teams are for. Now let's get you and that overnight bag back to Victoria's place. We have a perimeter to establish and a strategy session to conduct. They drove in convoy back to the residential tower, which now bristled with security personnel that somehow managed to stay invisible to casual observation. James had been thorough. Victoria met them at her apartment door, relief evident on her face. The girls are asleep. They had pizza and watched 2 movies and crashed around 8:30. I've been worried sick. Sorry, had some company on the drive back. Caleb filled her in on the alley confrontation while James posted guards in the hallway. Victoria listened with growing anger. They approached you directly? Intimidation tactic. Probably figured I'd scare easier than you did. They figured wrong. Yes, they did. James joined them in the living room, spreading tactical maps on the coffee table. All right, here's what we know. Nightfall Solutions has operational presence in this city. At least 4 contractors we've identified, probably more. They've been conducting surveillance on both of you for at least a week, maybe longer. Tonight was their opening move, testing your responses. What's their endgame? Victoria asked. Unknown. Could be they want the defense technology bad enough to try again. Could be they're cutting losses and just want to neutralize the witnesses who saw Morrison's face. Could be they're hiring and genuinely think Caleb would make a good recruit. James shrugged. Point is, we can't predict behavior reliably, so we prepare for everything. Caleb studied the maps. We need to shift from reactive to proactive. Figure out who hired Nightfall, why they want Victoria's technology so badly, and what leverage we can use to make them back off. That's FBI's job, Victoria pointed out. The FBI thinks in terms of arrests and prosecutions. We need to think in terms of survival and deterrence. Caleb looked at both of them. I spent 3 years running from conflict. I'm done running. But I won't fight stupid. We need intelligence, resources, and a plan. I can provide resources, Victoria said immediately. I can provide intelligence, James added. I still have contacts throughout the defense industry and private sector. If Nightfall's operating in our city, someone knows something. Then we start asking questions. Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. These people think they can threaten our families and walk away. Time to teach them otherwise. Behind him, Victoria and James exchanged glances. They both recognized the tone in Caleb's voice, the shift from defense to offense, from hiding to hunting. The janitor who'd saved Victoria's life was gone. In his place stood the Force Recon Marine who'd survived 3 tours in hell and come home still dangerous. In the morning, they'd start building their counteroffensive. But tonight, Caleb stood guard while his daughter slept safe in the next room, allied with people who'd proven themselves trustworthy, no longer running from shadows but preparing to face them head-on. The war had found him despite all his precautions, but this time he wasn't facing it alone. And this time, he was ready. Morning came too early and with too much coffee. Caleb woke on Victoria's couch to find James already at the dining table with 3 laptops open and a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the clipped tones of someone gathering intelligence. Victoria emerged from her bedroom looking like she'd slept even less than Caleb had, but her eyes were sharp and focused. The girls? Caleb asked quietly. Still asleep. I checked on them 20 minutes ago. Victoria moved to the kitchen and started another pot of coffee. James has been at it since 5 a.m. Apparently he doesn't believe in rest. Rest is for people who aren't being hunted, James called out without looking up from his screens. Give me 10 more minutes and I'll have something useful. Caleb stretched the kinks out of his back and joined James at the table. The screen showed financial records, corporate filings, and surveillance photos. James had been busy. Talk to me, Caleb said. James finished his call and turned to face them both. Nightfall Solutions is a front company, which we already suspected, but I traced their operational funding back through 4 shell corporations to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. That company is owned by a man named Viktor Kozlov, Russian national, former GRU officer, now running what the intelligence community politely calls a strategic acquisitions firm. Less politely, Victoria asked. He's an arms dealer and an industrial spy who specializes in stealing Western military technology and selling it to the highest bidder: China, Iran, North Korea, anyone with money and bad intentions. James pulled up a photo of a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit. Kozlov's been on half a dozen watch lists for years, but he's careful. Never gets his hands dirty, always uses cutouts and contractors, and operates from countries without extradition treaties. Caleb studied the photo. So Morrison and his team were working for Kozlov, trying to steal Victoria's drone guidance systems. Correct. And when that failed, Kozlov didn't just cut his losses, he escalated. James brought up another screen showing financial transactions. In the last week, Kozlov's moved significant funds into operational accounts associated with Nightfall. He's not backing down. He's doubling down. Why? Victoria leaned over the table. My technology is valuable, but it's not worth this kind of exposure. Every move Kozlov makes increases his risk of getting caught. Unless the technology is worth more than we think, Caleb said slowly. What exactly can your guidance systems do? Victoria hesitated, glancing between them. Most of it is classified, but the short version is that my systems allow autonomous drones to operate in GPS-denied environments using AI-driven visual navigation. They can identify and track targets without human input and coordinate with other drones in real time. It's next-generation warfare technology. And if someone like Kozlov got his hands on it, James asked, he could outfit entire drone swarms with autonomous kill capabilities, sell them to any regime or terrorist organization with deep pockets. We're talking about the potential to change modern warfare. No more operators, no more moral restraint, just machines making life and death decisions. Victoria's face was grim. That's why the Pentagon classified it at the highest levels, and why I've been fighting to keep tighter security protocols in place. The implications settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just corporate espionage anymore. This was about preventing a technological arms race that could destabilize global security. So what's Kozlov's next move? Caleb asked. That's what I've been trying to figure out. James pulled up building schematics. Titan defense systems from foundations to roof access. Option 1. He tries another direct assault on your facility. Option 2. He goes after the backup data servers at your off-site location. Option 3. He targets Victoria directly, either for kidnapping or elimination. There's a fourth option, Victoria said quietly. He targets the prototype. The actual physical drone with my systems installed. It's scheduled for Pentagon demonstration in 2 weeks at the military testing range outside the city. If Kozlov knows about that demonstration, and he probably does, that's his best opportunity. One shot to steal the actual hardware instead of just the data. Caleb's tactical mind was already spinning scenarios. A military testing range will have security. Army security, not expecting sophisticated infiltration. They're prepared for protesters and curious civilians, not professional operators. Victoria's expression was troubled. And the demonstration is happening because the Pentagon wants to see real-world performance before approving full funding. If we cancel or postpone, we lose the contract and probably the company. But if Kozlov hits us during the demonstration, he gets the prototype and embarrasses the U.S. military in one move, James finished. It's actually brilliant from his perspective. High reward, timing creates urgency that prevents proper security planning, and the chaos of a live demonstration provides cover for infiltration. Then we use it, Caleb said. We know he's coming. We know when and where. We turn his advantage into our advantage. Victoria stared at him. You want to let the demonstration happen? Knowing it's a trap? I want to turn it into a counter-trap. Let Kozlov think he's got the perfect opportunity while we're actually controlling every variable. We catch his team red-handed, with federal witnesses and military officials present. We end this permanently instead of just delaying it. James was nodding slowly. It's risky, but it might work. We'd need complete cooperation from the Pentagon and FBI. I can get the Pentagon, Victoria said. General Morrison, no relation to the contractor who attacked me, is overseeing the demonstration. He's old-school military, hates arms dealers with a passion. If I explain the situation, he'll want in. I can handle FBI, James added. I've got contacts in their counterintelligence division who've been trying to build a case against Kozlov for years. Give them a chance to catch him in the act and they'll mobilize. Caleb was already planning logistics in his head. We'll need 2 weeks to prepare. Recon the testing range, identify likely infiltration routes, coordinate with military security without tipping off anyone who might be compromised. James, you handle intelligence and federal coordination. Victoria, you keep normal operations running so we don't signal anything's changed. I'll build the tactical response plan. What about our daughters? Victoria asked. If Kozlov realizes we're setting a trap, he might go after them as leverage. They stay together, under guard, at locations he doesn't know about. We use the alliance we built. Caleb pulled out his phone. I've got a friend from my force recon days who runs a private security firm in Colorado. Owes me about 6 life debts. He's got a secure facility where families can stay when operators are deployed. If we send Abby and Ella there with proper protection, Kozlov can't touch them. You're talking about sending them away for 2 weeks, Victoria said, her voice strained. Ella's already dealing with trauma from the last attack, which is exactly why she needs to be somewhere Kozlov can't find her, somewhere safe enough that you can focus on the mission instead of worrying. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. I know it's hard, but this is how we protect them, by making sure the threat can't reach them while we eliminate it. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. Okay, make the call. But I'm going with them for the first few days, getting them settled, making sure Ella's comfortable. Then I'll come back for the demonstration. Fair enough? Footsteps in the hallway announced the girls waking up. Ella appeared first, followed by Abby, both of them disheveled and happy in the way only kids after a successful sleepover could be. Morning, Ella chirped. Can we have pancakes? Definitely, Victoria said, her mom voice sliding into place seamlessly. Go wash up, and I'll get started. The girls disappeared toward the bathroom, chattering about their plans for the day. Victoria looked at Caleb and James with eyes that said everything she couldn't voice in front of the kids. Fear and determination and the weight of decisions that might keep their children safe or put them at risk depending on how the next 2 weeks played out. We'll get through this, James said quietly. I've seen worse odds. So have I, Caleb agreed, and we're still here. Over pancakes and orange juice, the girls remained blissfully unaware of the plans being made around them. They talked about school and movies and whether unicorns could beat dragons in a fight. Normal kid stuff, the kind of conversations Abby had been missing for 3 years. Caleb watched his daughter laugh at something Ella said and felt his resolve harden. This was why he'd stopped running, this moment right here, his kid being a kid, having a friend, living a life that wasn't defined by her father's paranoia. Whatever it took to protect that, he'd do it. After breakfast, Victoria took the girls to Ella's room with instructions to pack for a special trip. Caleb made calls to Colorado while James coordinated with his FBI contacts. By noon, they had a plan taking shape. The facility in Colorado was called Sanctuary Ridge, and Caleb's friend Marcus Chen confirmed they had space for 2 families with full security protocols. Ex-military staff, remote location, state-of-the-art surveillance, and enough defensive measures to stop anything short of a military assault. The girls could continue their schoolwork remotely, have access to recreational facilities, and stay safe while the adults handled business. How do we sell this to them? Victoria asked as they stood in her kitchen, watching the girls play in the other room. Ella's going to have questions. She's not stupid. We tell them the truth, just age-appropriate version, Caleb said. That bad people are still interested in your company's work, that we're taking precautions, and that they get to go on an adventure to a cool mountain resort while we handle boring adult problems. You think they'll buy it? Kids are resilient, and they trust us. We just have to trust them back. That evening, they sat both girls down and explained the situation as gently as possible. Abby took it in stride. 3 years of her dad's security measures had prepared her for sudden changes. Ella was more anxious, but when Victoria explained they'd be going together, that they'd be safe, and that it was only temporary, she relaxed slightly. Will you come visit? Ella asked her mother. I'll come with you for the first few days, get you settled, then I have to come back for work. But I'll video call every day, promise. Victoria hugged her daughter. This is just to make sure you're safe while we fix the problem. Then everything goes back to normal. Well, what if normal is boring? Abby asked suddenly. What if after all this excitement, regular life is just blah? Caleb smiled despite the tension. Then we'll find exciting things that don't involve bad guys. How about skydiving when you're old enough? Really? Let's survive the next 2 weeks first. Then we'll talk about throwing you out of airplanes. The girls giggled and some of the weight lifted from the room. Kids had an amazing capacity for adapting to circumstances adults found terrifying. Maybe that was their superpower. They flew to Colorado the next morning on a private charter Victoria arranged, harder to track than commercial flights, and James had swept the plane for surveillance devices personally. The facility lived up to its name, a sprawling compound in the Rockies that looked like a luxury resort from the outside, but had security infrastructure that impressed even Caleb's critical eye. Marcus Chen met them at the helipad, a stocky Chinese-American man in his 40s with laugh lines around his eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen serious combat. Gunny Ward, been too long, brother. Marcus pulled Caleb into a hug that probably cracked ribs. And this must be Abby. You look just like your dad, kid. Sorry about that. Abby giggled. Dad says you saved his life in Afghanistan. Twice, but who's counting? Marcus turned to Victoria and Ella. Mrs. Kane, welcome to Sanctuary Ridge. Your families will be safe here. I guarantee it personally. Victoria shook his hand. Thank you for taking us on such short notice. Any friend of Caleb's gets priority service. Besides, I owe him about 6 times over. This barely makes a dent. Marcus gestured toward the main building. Let me show you around. The girls will have their own suite fully equipped with whatever they need for remote schooling. You've got secure communications, recreational facilities, including a climbing wall and indoor pool, and my staff is made up entirely of former special operations personnel. We take protection seriously here. The tour revealed a place that managed to feel both secure and welcoming. The girls' suite had 2 bedrooms connected by a shared living space, with computers, art supplies, and enough books and games to occupy them for months. Large windows offered stunning mountain views while being made of bulletproof glass thick enough to stop a .50 caliber round. This is amazing, Ella breathed, staring at the mountains. Can we go hiking? Abby asked. Supervised hikes, absolutely, Marcus confirmed. We've got trails that are completely secure. And if you girls are interested, we offer some basic self-defense training. Nothing serious, just confidence-building stuff. Helps kids feel less scared when the world seems scary. Caleb met Marcus's eyes and nodded gratefully. The man understood that protection wasn't just about physical security, it was about emotional resilience too. Victoria stayed for 3 days, getting Ella settled and comfortable, video calling with her office to maintain appearances of normalcy. Caleb stayed too, making sure Abby understood the protocols and felt safe. Leaving was harder than he'd anticipated. You'll come back soon? Abby asked as he prepared to fly out. As soon as we've handled the problem. 2 weeks, maybe less. And then things will be normal? Real normal, not fake normal, where you're pretending everything's fine, but really you're worried? Caleb knelt to eye level with his daughter. I can't promise things will be perfect, but I can promise I'm done running and hiding. Whatever normal looks like after this, we'll figure it out together. Deal? Deal. Abby hugged him fiercely. Be careful, Dad. I know you're good at the dangerous stuff, but I need you to come back. Always do, baby girl, always. The flight back to the city felt longer than the flight out. Caleb stared out the window, watching mountains give way to plains, and thought about the next 2 weeks. Everything had to go perfectly. One mistake, one overlooked detail, and Kozlov would slip through their fingers, or worse, succeed in stealing the technology. James met him at the airport with updates. The FBI was on board, quietly assembling a task force. General Morrison at the Pentagon was coordinating military security without alerting anyone outside a tight circle. And Victoria had returned to work, playing her part perfectly, acting like nothing had changed while secretly helping plan the trap. Kozlov's making moves too, James said as they drove toward Titan defense systems. His contractors are asking questions around the city, trying to figure out where the girls went. So far, they've hit dead ends, but it confirms he's interested in leverage. Good. Let him waste resources chasing ghosts. Meanwhile, we prepare. Caleb studied the passing cityscape. What's the testing range looking like? Military security is adequate, but not exceptional. I've walked the grounds with General Morrison. Multiple access points, long perimeter, lots of vehicle traffic during demonstrations. Kozlov's team could infiltrate his maintenance crew, media personnel, even observers if they've got convincing credentials. Then we need to control all those vectors, lock down access, vet every single person who's on site, and have response teams positioned to intercept any infiltration attempt. That's going to take coordination and resources. Victoria's providing resources. The FBI is providing manpower. The military is providing authority. We just need to pull it together without tipping Kozlov off. Caleb's mind was already building the tactical plan, thinking 3 moves ahead. What's our intelligence on Kozlov's likely approach? My sources say he's brought in a specialist, woman named Katya Volkov, former Spetsnaz, expertise in infiltration and extraction. She's hit 3 high-security targets in the last 2 years without leaving evidence. If Kozlov's using her, we're dealing with top-tier opposition. Good, James glanced at him. Good? Means when we catch her, we've got leverage against Kozlov. Professionals like Volkov don't work cheap. He's invested significant money in this operation. When it fails, that failure costs him reputation and resources, makes him vulnerable. You're thinking beyond just stopping the theft. I'm thinking about ending the threat permanently. Kozlov keeps coming because he thinks the reward is worth the risk. We need to change that calculation, make it cost more than he's willing to pay. They spent the next week building the trap with meticulous precision. Victoria coordinated with General Morrison, adjusting the demonstration schedule to create what looked like security gaps but were actually carefully monitored channels. James worked with FBI counterintelligence to identify and track all nightfall contractors in the city, building a real-time intelligence picture. And Caleb designed the tactical response, positioning teams to intercept any infiltration attempt while maintaining the appearance of normal security operations. The testing range became a chessboard, and they controlled every piece except Kozlov's. The question was whether their opponent would play into their hands or surprise them with an unexpected move. Victoria called every evening to check on Ella, and Caleb did the same with Abby. The girls were thriving in Colorado, apparently having the time of their lives hiking and swimming and learning basic self-defense from Marcus's staff. Hearing their laughter over video calls made the long hours and stress worthwhile. They're going to be disappointed when they come home and life gets boring again, Victoria commented one night as they reviewed plans in her office. It was late, past midnight, and they'd been at it for hours. Maybe boring is underrated, Caleb said. After this is done, boring sounds pretty good. Does it, though? You spent 3 years being boring and you hated it. I hated hiding. There's a difference. Caleb leaned back in his chair. I think there's a middle ground between hiding behind a mop bucket and getting into shootouts with Russian arms dealers. We just have to find it. And if we can't, then we adapt. Figure it out as we go. That's what survivors do. He looked at her across the desk. How are you holding up? Really? Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm terrified. I'm angry. I'm exhausted. And I'm determined not to let Kozlov win. Is that enough? It's more than enough. Fear and anger can be useful if you channel them correctly. Caleb smiled slightly. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for. Most CEOs would have folded by now, given Kozlov what he wanted, taken the easy way out. You're fighting. That matters. So are you. You could have stayed hidden, kept your daughter safe through anonymity. Instead, you stood up. Victoria returned the smile. We make a good team, Ward. Yeah, we do. The moment held weight neither of them was quite ready to examine. They'd been through combat together, made life and death decisions, trusted each other with their children's safety. That forged bonds that normal relationships took years to build. But there wasn't time to think about what that meant, not with the demonstration looming. 3 days before the scheduled event, James got a break. One of his FBI contacts identified a rental property on the outskirts of the city that showed the signature patterns of a staging area, short-term lease, paid in cash, utility usage consistent with multiple occupants, and vehicles coming and going at odd hours. Surveillance confirmed at least 6 individuals matching descriptions of known Nightfall contractors. That's Kozlov's team, James confirmed, showing them surveillance photos, including our specialist, Katya Volkov. The photos showed a striking woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled back, moving with the economy of motion that marked serious operators. In one image, she was studying a tablet displaying what looked like facility layouts. In another, she was inspecting equipment cases that probably held weapons and infiltration gear. "They're preparing for the demonstration," Victoria said, studying the photos. "This is really happening." "This is what we planned for," Caleb reminded her. "We know where they are. We know what they're planning. Now we just execute." The next 2 days were a blur of final preparations. Federal agents moved into position around the testing range, disguised as various personnel. Military security was briefed on the real situation and given specific protocols. Victoria worked with General Morrison to ensure the prototype drone would be protected while still appearing vulnerable. Every variable was accounted for, every contingency planned. The night before the demonstration, Caleb stood in Victoria's apartment. He'd been staying in her guest room since leaving Colorado, easier to coordinate, and called Abby one last time. "Tomorrow's the big day," he told her. "Are you going to catch the bad guys?" "That's the plan." "Good. I want to come home. Colorado's fun, but I miss our apartment and school, and even Mrs. Chen's weird cooking." Abby paused. "And I want to know that we're actually safe, not just hiding." "Tomorrow we make that happen, I promise. Be careful anyway." "Always am, baby girl." After the call, Caleb sat in the guest room checking and rechecking his gear. Tactical vest, communications equipment, non-lethal weapons for crowd control, lethal options for worst-case scenarios. He'd requested and received authorization to operate as Victoria's personal security during the demonstration, which gave him access and authority without raising suspicions. Victoria knocked on his door around midnight. "Can't sleep either?" "Adrenaline. It's like this before every operation. Body knows something's coming." "Is it always this terrifying?" "Usually more so. At least this time we're not being shot at yet." "Yet. That's reassuring." She leaned against the doorframe. "Thank you, Caleb, for everything. For saving my life that first night, for taking this job, for helping protect Ella. I know you didn't sign up for this level of chaos." "Actually, I kind of did. The chaos found me anyway. At least this way I'm fighting it instead of running." Caleb stood and faced her. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop hiding, for seeing past the janitor costume to the person underneath. That matters more than you know." They stood in the hallway, the space between them charged with everything unspoken, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance and discovered they worked better as a team than either had expected. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Victoria said quietly, "I'm glad we're facing it together." "Me too." She squeezed his hand once, then retreated to her bedroom. Caleb returned to his gear check, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking about how much had changed in a month. How a terrified girl running through dark corridors had led to this moment, standing on the edge of a confrontation that would either end the threat permanently or prove they'd underestimated their enemy. Dawn came too quickly. Caleb was up at 5, running through scenarios one last time. Victoria emerged at 6, dressed in professional attire that managed to look both CEO appropriate and practical for potential combat situations. They ate a quiet breakfast, neither saying much, both lost in their own preparations. The drive to the testing range took 40 minutes. They arrived early, watching as military personnel and Pentagon officials began gathering for the demonstration. General Morrison, a stern man in his 60s with 3 stars on his uniform, met them personally. "Mrs. Kane, Mr. Ward, everything's in place. My security teams have been briefed on the real situation without compromising operational security. FBI has agents positioned throughout the facility. We're ready for whatever Kozlov throws at us." "Let's hope that's enough," Victoria said. "Let's make sure it is," Caleb countered. The next hour was controlled chaos. As attendees arrived, credentials were checked, and the demonstration area was prepared. Victoria's prototype drone sat on its launch platform, looking deceptively simple. Just another piece of military hardware, not the revolutionary technology that could change warfare. Military personnel buzzed around it, making final checks and adjustments. Caleb moved through the crowd with practiced awareness, marking faces, tracking movements, looking for anything that didn't belong. James was doing the same from a different position, their communications linked through tactical earpieces. FBI agents pretended to be media crews, maintenance workers, even military observers. "Anything?" James's voice crackled in Caleb's ear. "Nothing yet. But they're here. Somewhere. I've got movement on the south perimeter. Maintenance van that wasn't on the manifest. Could be nothing. Or could be everything. I'm moving to intercept." Caleb drifted through the crowd toward the south side of the facility, his eyes tracking the van James had mentioned. It looked legitimate, proper military markings, driven by someone in appropriate uniform. But something about the driver's posture was wrong, too alert, too tactical. He keyed his mic. "James, run the plates on that van and get me a visual on the driver." "On it." Caleb moved closer, using other vehicles as cover, watching as the van parked in a maintenance area near the demonstration platform. The driver got out, male, 30s, military haircut, and opened the back doors. Two more people emerged, both wearing maintenance coveralls. But their movements were wrong for maintenance workers. Too coordinated, too efficient. "Plates are fake," James confirmed. "And facial recognition just hit on the driver, Anton Petrov, known Nightfall contractor, former Russian military. Caleb, that's them." "Copy. Alerting FBI now. Hold positions and watch for others. This might be a diversion." Caleb switched channels to the FBI frequency. "This is Ward. I've got positive ID on 3 hostiles in a maintenance van, south perimeter. Request intercept team but maintain surveillance. There may be multiple elements." "Copy that, Ward. Teams moving to your position." The demonstration was scheduled to start in 15 minutes. Victoria stood on a platform with General Morrison and other Pentagon officials preparing to present her technology. She glanced across the crowd and met Caleb's eyes. He gave her a subtle nod. They were in motion. The 3 contractors from the van moved toward the prototype drone with purpose, carrying equipment cases that probably held weapons and theft tools. But they moved cautiously, aware of security, looking for their moment. That's when Caleb saw her. Katya Volkov, dressed as a media photographer, complete with professional camera and press credentials, moving through the crowd with the confident invisibility of someone who belonged. She was positioning herself near the drone, close enough to act when the moment came. "James, I've got Volkov. Northwest side, media section. She's the primary threat." "Copy. I see her. FBI is tracking." General Morrison stepped to the microphone to begin the demonstration. Victoria stood beside him, playing her part perfectly, looking calm and professional despite knowing what was about to happen. The crowd quieted as Morrison began speaking about the revolutionary technology they were about to witness. That's when everything went wrong in the best possible way. Volkov made her move, dropping the camera and pulling what looked like a remote device from her jacket. The 3 contractors from the van broke into a run toward the drone. And from the crowd, 4 more individuals revealed themselves. Backup team, coming from different directions, coordinated assault. But Caleb and his team were ready. FBI agents swarmed from every direction, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Military security locked down the perimeter. Caleb himself moved to intercept Volkov, who'd realized the trap and was trying to escape. She was fast, professional. The moment she saw Caleb coming, she abandoned the device and ran, using the panicking crowd as cover. Caleb pursued, tracking her movement, predicting her path. She vaulted over barriers, slid under vehicles, moved like water through obstacles. But Caleb had spent 3 years working as maintenance, learning every inch of facilities like this. He knew where she was heading before she did, the vehicle lot, where escape would be possible if she could reach a car. He cut her off at the lot entrance, positioning himself between her and freedom. Volkov skidded to a stop, assessing him with professional interest. "The janitor," she said in accented English. "Morrison told us about you, former Force Recon. I'm impressed." "Surrender. You're surrounded. The mission failed." "Did it?" She smiled slightly. "You assume we came for the drone. That was always secondary." Understanding hit Caleb like cold water. "Victoria." He spun, keying his mic desperately. This is a diversion. Primary target is Kane herself. Repeat, primary target is... The explosion cut him off. Not a large one, just enough to create chaos and smoke. Exactly where Victoria had been standing, Caleb ran. The smoke was still clearing when Caleb reached the demonstration platform, his heart hammering against his ribs. Bodies littered the ground, some military personnel, some contractors, all caught in the blast radius. General Morrison was being pulled to safety by his security detail, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead but alive. Pentagon officials scrambled for cover while FBI agents shouted commands and secured the perimeter. But Victoria was gone. "James!" Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. "Where is she?" Two hostiles grabbed her during the confusion, dragged her toward the east vehicle entrance. Black SUV, no plates. James's voice was tight with controlled panic. "They're heading for the main road." Caleb was already running, his training taking over, calculating angles and pursuit options. The testing range had limited exits, all of which would be blocked by now, which meant Kozlov's team had to have a different extraction plan, something they'd prepared in advance, something that didn't rely on conventional escape routes. "Check the airspace," Caleb barked into his mic. "They're not leaving by road. They can't. They've got a helicopter or small aircraft staged somewhere." "On it." James's fingers would be flying across his laptop, accessing military radar and civilian flight control. "Got it. Unscheduled helicopter, civilian registration, but the paperwork's fake. Currently on approach to the range's northwest quadrant, unpopulated area beyond the testing perimeter." "That's where they're taking her. I need a vehicle now." A military jeep screeched to a halt beside him, driven by a young MP who looked barely out of training. "Sir, Colonel Hartley sent me. Said you'd need transport." Caleb jumped in. "Northwest quadrant, fast as you can. And radio ahead. I need that helicopter grounded, or I need to be on it before it leaves. No other options." The MP floored it, tearing across the testing range toward the perimeter fence. Through the windshield, Caleb could see the black SUV ahead, driving recklessly across rough terrain, kicking up dust. Behind it, 3 FBI vehicles were in pursuit, but they were losing ground. The SUV had better off-road capability and drivers who clearly didn't care about safety. "They're going to make it to the helicopter," the MP said, his voice young and scared. "We can't catch them in time." "Yes, we can." Caleb grabbed the radio. "FBI units in pursuit. This is Ward. I need you to force that SUV east, away from their extraction point. Drive them toward the old artillery range, the one with the collapsed bunkers. Give me a terrain advantage." "Copy that, Ward. Executing." The FBI vehicles adjusted their pursuit, using tactical driving to herd the SUV away from its intended path. The contractors realized what was happening and tried to compensate, but they were committed now, moving too fast to stop. The SUV swerved east, exactly where Caleb wanted it. "Kid, you ever do any combat driving?" Caleb asked the MP. "No, sir. Just the training course." "About to get your advanced certification. Cut across their path. I'm going to jump." "You're going to what?" "You heard me. Get me alongside that SUV, passenger side, at about 40 miles per hour, then brake hard." The MP's eyes went wide, but he followed orders, pushing the Jeep harder, closing the distance. Caleb unbuckled, moved into a crouch, muscles coiled. The SUV was 20 feet ahead, then 15, then 10. "Now!" Caleb shouted. The MP swerved alongside the SUV just as Caleb launched himself across the gap. For one suspended moment, he was airborne, the ground blurring beneath him at lethal speed. Then his hands caught the SUV's roof rack, his body slamming against the passenger side with enough force to crack ribs, if not for the tactical vest. The contractor in the passenger seat saw him through the window and raised a pistol. Caleb kicked backward, driving his boot through the side mirror and using the momentum to swing himself onto the roof. The gun fired, the bullet missing by inches, punching a hole through the roof. Caleb pulled his baton, extended it in one smooth motion, and smashed it through the windshield. The driver flinched, lost control for a critical second, and the SUV hit a rut that sent it airborne. They crashed down hard, the vehicle rolling once, twice, coming to rest on its side in a cloud of dust and twisted metal. Caleb rode it out, holding onto the roof rack, then dropped to the ground as the vehicle settled. His body screamed protest, but training overrode pain. He wrenched open the passenger door, now facing skyward, and pulled the dazed contractor out, zip-tying him in seconds. The driver was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound, non-lethal, but he wasn't going anywhere. "Victoria!" Caleb looked into the back seat and found her conscious, battered, but alive. Blood ran from a cut above her eye, and her wrists were zip-tied, but her eyes were clear and focused. "About time," she managed, her voice shaky but defiant. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." "Never doubted it for a second, did you?" Caleb cut her restraints with his knife, helped her climb out of the wreckage. "Can you run? Can I have another option?" "Not if we want to live." The helicopter was audible now, close and getting closer. Through the settling dust, Caleb could see it descending toward an improvised landing zone about 200 yards away. Volkov would be there, waiting for her team to arrive with Victoria. When they didn't show, she'd have decisions to make: abort the mission or come looking. FBI vehicles were converging on their position, but they were still 90 seconds out. 90 seconds could be a lifetime in combat situations. "James, where's Volkov?" Caleb spoke into his mic while pulling Victoria toward cover, an old concrete bunker half collapsed but still offering protection. "Lost her in the chaos. She's got to be near the helicopter. Caleb, military air support is 2 minutes out. If that helicopter lifts off before they arrive, it's gone. Then we make sure it doesn't lift off." They reached the bunker as the helicopter touched down. Caleb risked a glance around the concrete and saw Volkov emerge from behind a rock formation, moving toward the aircraft. She was scanning the area, looking for her team, her hand on a radio. When they didn't appear, she'd realized the mission had failed. The question was whether she'd cut her losses or try to salvage something from the disaster. "Stay here," Caleb told Victoria. "FBI is 30 seconds out. You'll be safe." "What are you going to do?" "Stop that helicopter from leaving. If Volkov escapes, Kozlov sends another team, and another, until he succeeds or we're dead. This ends today." "Caleb, you can't." But he was already moving, using the terrain for cover, closing the distance to the helicopter. Volkov saw him coming and made her decision. She pulled a weapon, compact submachine gun, professional grade, and opened fire. Rounds sparked off rocks as Caleb dove for cover, rolled, came up moving to a different position. This wasn't like the movies where people had unlimited ammunition and could shoot forever. Volkov would have maybe 30 rounds in that magazine, and she was burning through them with controlled bursts. Caleb counted shots, waiting for the pause that meant she was reloading. When it came, he moved. He covered 20 yards in seconds, using old artillery craters for concealment, emerging within striking distance. Volkov saw him, dropped the empty magazine, and made a choice. She could reload and shoot, or she could run for the helicopter. She chose the helicopter. Caleb ran after her. She was fast, but he was motivated by something stronger than training or professionalism. He was motivated by the memory of his daughter, asking him to be careful, by the sound of Victoria's voice in the wrecked SUV, by 3 years of running from fights he should have stood and faced. He caught Volkov 10 feet from the helicopter, his hand closing around her tactical vest, yanking her backward. She spun, her training kicking in, throwing strikes that would have dropped most opponents. But Caleb had been fighting since before she learned to walk, and he'd fought in places that made this look civilized. They traded blows with brutal efficiency, her Spetsnaz training against his force recon experience. She was good. Maybe as good as Caleb, but she was fighting for money and reputation. Caleb was fighting for family. He got inside her guard, drove his elbow into her sternum, followed with a sweep that took her legs out. She hit the ground hard, and Caleb was on her, knee on her chest, baton across her throat. "It's over," he said. "Mission failed. Your team is in custody. The drone is secure. All you've got left is a choice. Surrender or don't. But either way, you're not leaving in that helicopter." Volkov stared up at him with eyes that calculated odds and didn't like what they found. Then she smiled slightly. "You're better than Morrison said. He underestimated you." "Everyone does. It's my secret weapon." "Fair enough." She raised her hands in surrender. "I'm done. But you should know, Kozlov doesn't stop. Even with this failure, even with me captured, he'll keep coming. That's who he is. Then we'll keep stopping him. That's who we are. FBI agents swarmed the area, weapons drawn, securing Volkov and the helicopter pilot. Military air support roared overhead, Apache gunships that would have blown the helicopter out of the sky if it had tried to leave. General Morrison appeared with his security detail, looking battered but triumphant. "Mr. Ward, hell of a piece of work." Morrison extended his hand. "I've read your service record. What's not classified, anyway? You're everything they said you were." "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job was chief of security. Pretty sure tackling Russian spies and jumping between moving vehicles wasn't in the job description." Morrison's expression was serious. "But I'm damn glad you were here. We'll want a full debrief, but right now I think you've got someone waiting for you." Victoria was being checked by medics near the bunker, refusing treatment until she saw Caleb approaching. When she did, she pushed past the medics and met him halfway, pulling him into a hug that surprised both of them. "You're insane," she said against his shoulder. "Completely insane. Jumping onto moving vehicles, fighting trained assassins. Do you have any sense of self-preservation?" "Not really. It's a character flaw I'm working on." She pulled back, looking at him with eyes that held too many emotions to name. "Thank you for coming after me, for not giving up, for everything. That's what partners do. We don't leave each other behind." "Partners?" Victoria repeated, and something in the way she said it suggested she was thinking about more than just their professional relationship. But that was a conversation for later, when they weren't surrounded by FBI agents and military personnel and the wreckage of a failed kidnapping attempt. The next few hours were a blur of debriefings and statements and official reports. Volkov and her entire team were in custody, their equipment seized, their operation completely dismantled. The FBI was ecstatic. They had enough evidence to build a case against Kozlov's entire organization, enough leverage to potentially bring him to justice after years of operating with impunity. James pulled Caleb aside during a break in the questioning. "Captain Reeves called. Wanted me to pass along a message. Well done, and welcome back to the real world. Whatever that means. It means I'm officially not hiding anymore." "How does that feel?" Caleb thought about it. About the last month. About everything that had changed since a terrified girl ran into him in a dark hallway. Terrifying, exhausting, completely worth it. Good. Because Victoria's already talking about security upgrades and long-term protection protocols. "I think you're stuck with us, Gunny." "Could be worse, could be pushing a mop." "Could be dead," James countered. "But you're not. And neither is Victoria, and those little girls get to come home to parents who are still alive. So yeah, I'd say this is a win." They flew back to the city that evening, Victoria and Caleb both exhausted but unable to sleep. The helicopter ride gave them time to decompress, to process what had happened, to think about what came next. "Kozlov's going to be arrested," Victoria said, staring out at the city lights below. "The FBI has enough evidence now. It'll take time, extradition battles, but he's done. We actually ended it. For now, but James was right. There will be others. Your technology is too valuable. Someone will always want it badly enough to try." "Then I guess I need a really good chief of security. Know anyone qualified?" Caleb smiled. "I might know a guy, though he comes with baggage, traumatized daughter, paranoid tendencies, habit of solving problems with violence." "Perfect. He'll fit right in." They landed at the private airfield near Titan Defense Systems as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Victoria's car was waiting, as was her assistant Sarah, with updates that could wait until tomorrow. James had already headed to his office to coordinate with FBI and begin the formal security review that would take weeks. But right now, in this moment, there was just Victoria and Caleb standing on the tarmac, looking at each other with the recognition that something fundamental had shifted between them. "We should go get the girls," Victoria said. "They've been in Colorado for 2 weeks. They're probably going crazy. They're probably having the time of their lives and won't want to come home." "Maybe, but I want them home anyway. I want Ella where I can see her, where I know she's safe, where I can just be her mom instead of the CEO who almost got kidnapped." "I know the feeling." They drove to Victoria's apartment to clean up and make arrangements. While Victoria coordinated the return flight to Colorado, Caleb called Abby. "Dad, did you catch them? Are they gone? Can we come home?" The relief in his daughter's voice made everything worth it. "Yeah, baby girl, we caught them. You can come home." "Really? Really? Not just for a little while before we have to move again?" Really, really, this is home now, for as long as we want it to be. Oh, thank God. I mean, Colorado is cool, and Marcus is great, and Ella and I have been having fun, but I miss our apartment, and I miss you, and I kind of miss Mrs. Chen's weird cooking, even though I said I didn't. Abby paused. Are you okay? You sound tired. I am tired, but I'm good. Better than good. Caleb found himself smiling despite the exhaustion. Listen, we're going to fly out tomorrow morning to get you guys. But tonight, I want you to know something. You were right about hiding not being the same as living, about needing to stand up instead of running away. So thank you for being brave enough to make me be brave. Dad, that's like really deep. Are you sure you're okay? He laughed. I'm sure. Get some sleep. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Abby. More than you know. He ended the call to find Victoria watching him from the kitchen doorway. She sounds happy. She is. They both are. Caleb set down his phone. We did good today, Victoria. We kept them safe. We stopped the threat. We won. We did. Victoria moved into the living room, settling onto the couch with a glass of wine she'd poured for herself and a beer she'd grabbed for Caleb. So why do I feel like we're just getting started? Because we are. This was one battle. There will be others. Different threats, different challenges. That's life when you're sitting on technology that could change the world. Great, something to look forward to. But Victoria was smiling as she said it. At least I've got a good team now. You, James, a security infrastructure that actually works. And apparently I've got a former Marine who's willing to jump onto moving vehicles for me. That was a one-time thing. Next time I'm using a helicopter. There's going to be a next time? Probably not. But if there is, we'll handle it. Together? They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks, watching the city lights through the windows. It felt surreal. Just yesterday, they'd been preparing for a confrontation that could have ended with both of them dead. Now they were sitting on her couch like normal people, planning to pick up their daughters from what amounted to a vacation. Can I ask you something? Victoria said eventually. When did you know you were going to stay? That you weren't going to run again? Caleb thought about it, tracing the decision back through the chaos of the last month. That first night, when Ella ran into me crying about her mom, I looked at her and saw Abby, and I realized I was tired of being the kind of person who'd let fear stop me from helping. Everything after that was just following through on that decision. That simple? That's simple. Not easy, but simple. Sometimes the right choice is obvious. We just have to be brave enough to make it. Victoria nodded slowly. I made a decision today too. When those contractors were dragging me toward that helicopter, and I didn't know if you were coming, I decided that if I got out of this alive, I was going to stop treating my life like it was just about work and responsibility. I was going to actually live it, spend time with Ella, build friendships, maybe even... She stopped, looking uncertain. Maybe even what? Maybe even let someone in. The way Michael used to say I should if anything ever happened to him. He made me promise not to shut myself off, not to let being his widow become my whole identity. But I did anyway, until you showed up and reminded me that life is too short and too dangerous to spend it alone. The implications hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. They were both damaged people. Victoria with her grief and workaholic tendencies, Caleb with his trauma and protective paranoia. But they'd been forced together by circumstance and discovered they worked. They balanced each other. They made each other braver. I'm not sure I'm the best candidate for letting in, Caleb said carefully. I come with a lot of complications. An ex-wife who's a mess, a daughter who's been through too much, a past that keeps finding me no matter how hard I try to leave it behind. And I come with a company that attracts Russian arms dealers, a daughter who has nightmares about men with guns, and enough emotional baggage to fill a cargo plane. Victoria set down her wine glass. We're both disasters, Caleb, but maybe we're disasters that make sense together. Maybe we are. They didn't say anything else that night. There would be time later for definitions and discussions and figuring out what this thing between them actually was. Right now, it was enough to sit together, alive and safe, knowing their daughters would be home soon and the immediate threat was neutralized. Morning came with sunshine and renewed purpose. They flew to Colorado in Victoria's private jet, arriving at Sanctuary Ridge by mid-morning. Marcus met them at the helipad with a grin. "Your girls are going to be disappointed to leave. They've been running this place like they own it." He led them into the main building. "Fair warning, they've gotten very comfortable with our self-defense training. Abby threw one of my instructors yesterday. On purpose. With correct technique." "That's my girl," Caleb said proudly. They found the girls in the training room, both of them wearing workout clothes and demonstrating moves they'd learned to a delighted group of instructors. Ella saw Victoria first and screamed, running across the room and launching herself into her mother's arms. "Mom, you're back! Did you catch the bad guys? Are we safe? Can we go home?" Victoria held her daughter tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her alive and well. "We caught them. We're safe. And yes, we're going home." Abby was more reserved with Caleb, walking over instead of running, but her eyes were bright with relief. "You kept your promise. Always do. And we're really not moving this time?" "Really not moving, unless you want to, which would be weird, but I'd consider it." Abby laughed and hugged him, and Caleb felt something in his chest unlock that had been tight for 3 years. They were going to be okay, both of them. They'd finally found a place worth staying for. The flight home was boisterous, the girls talking over each other about their adventures in Colorado, while Victoria and Caleb listened with the bemused expressions of parents, realizing their children had been having way more fun than expected. "And Marcus taught us how to throw knives," Ella announced. "Real knives. Well, training knives, but still." "We should probably talk about that," Victoria said to Marcus, who joined them for the flight back. They were supervised the entire time, and honestly, they're naturals, especially Abby. Marcus nodded at Caleb. "Your daughter's got your instincts, Gunny. She's going to be formidable when she grows up." "That's what I'm afraid of," Caleb muttered, but he was smiling. Back in the city, they drove to Victoria's building first. The security upgrades Caleb had ordered were already visible: new cameras, additional guards, upgraded access systems. But more than that, there was a feeling of safety that hadn't existed before. Like the building itself knew it was protected now. "Come up for dinner," Victoria said as they stood in the lobby. "Both of you. We can order pizza, let the girls decompress, figure out the next steps." "The next steps?" Caleb asked. "For all of us. This alliance we built. I don't think it should end just because the crisis is over. Do you?" Caleb looked at Abby, who was holding Ella's hand and talking animatedly about something that had happened in Colorado. He thought about the last month, about how much had changed, about the possibility of a life that wasn't defined by fear and isolation. "No," he said, "I don't think it should end." Dinner was chaos in the best possible way. The girls demanded pizza with what Victoria called structurally unsound amounts of toppings. They told stories about Colorado that got more exaggerated with each retelling. They made plans for sleepovers and movie nights and adventures that assumed tomorrow was guaranteed instead of uncertain. And through it all, Caleb and Victoria caught each other's eyes across the table, sharing silent conversations about schedules and security and whether this thing they were building could actually work long-term. After the girls finally crashed in Ella's room, exhausted from their excitement, the adults sat in the living room with wine and beer and the comfortable silence of people who'd survived something together. "So," James said, he'd joined them for dinner at Victoria's insistence. "What now? Kozlov's organization is being dismantled. Your security is the best in the industry. The girls are safe. We actually won. What does winning look like from here?" "It looks like normal," Victoria said. "Or as normal as we can manage. Running a company, raising our daughters, building lives that aren't defined by crisis." "And staying ready," Caleb added, "because there will be other threats. Maybe not Kozlov, but someone. That's the price of having something worth protecting." "Optimistic," James noted dryly. "Realistic," Caleb corrected. "But I'm okay with it. For the first time in years, I'm okay with being visible, being known, being present in my life instead of hiding from it. That's worth the risk." "Hear, hear," Victoria raised her glass. "To being present, to building something real, and to the best damn security team a CEO could ask for." They clinked glasses, and for a moment everything was perfect. Not because the danger was gone, it never really was. Not because everything was solved, life was more complicated than that. but because they'd found something worth fighting for and people worth fighting alongside. 6 months later, Caleb stood in his new office at Titan Defense Systems, actual office with windows and everything, reviewing security protocols with his team. He'd built something impressive, hiring former military personnel who understood real threats, implementing systems that made the facility one of the most secure in the country, creating a culture where safety wasn't an inconvenience but a priority. Abby was thriving at her new school, still best friends with Ella, both girls growing more confident and capable with each passing week. The nightmares had faded for both of them, replaced with normal kid concerns like math tests and soccer tryouts, and whether they should both dress up as dragons for Halloween. Victoria had promoted Caleb to executive security director and given him the budget to properly protect not just the facility, but the people who worked there. She'd also, after several awkward conversations and one very memorable dinner where Abby and Ella had conspired to leave them alone together, agreed to try dating. It was slow and careful and complicated by their respective baggage, but it was real. Morrison and the other Nightfall contractors had pled guilty in federal court, receiving significant sentences. Volkov had turned state's evidence, providing testimony that had dismantled Kozlov's entire operation. The Russian arms dealer himself was currently fighting extradition from a country that would probably eventually hand him over, meaning his days of threatening people like Victoria were numbered. But the real victory, Caleb thought as he looked out his office window at the city below, wasn't stopping one threat or catching one criminal. It was this: having a life worth living, a daughter who was happy, friends he could trust, and a future that looked like possibility instead of just survival. His phone buzzed. Text from Abby. Movie night tonight? Ella's mom said yes, if you say yes. Please say yes. Caleb smiled and typed back, yes, I'll bring popcorn. Another text came through immediately. This one from Victoria. The girls are conspiring again, fair warning. Conspiring to do what? Get us alone together. They're very obvious about it. It's actually kind of adorable. Should we pretend not to notice? Definitely. Wouldn't want to ruin their fun. Caleb pocketed his phone and looked around his office one more time. 3 years ago, he'd been a janitor, invisible and isolated, convinced that hiding was the same as protecting. He'd been wrong about so many things, but he'd learned, he'd grown, and when a terrified little girl had run into him in a dark hallway, he'd made the choice to stop running and start fighting. That choice had changed everything. James stuck his head in the office door. Staff meeting in 10. You ready? Always. Good. Because Victoria wants to discuss expanding our security consulting to other defense contractors. Apparently word got out that we're actually competent at this, and now everyone wants our services. Everyone? Okay, 3 companies, but still, it's a start. Caleb grabbed his tablet and followed James toward the conference room. As they walked through the building that had once been his nighttime domain, he nodded to engineers and executives and administrative staff who all knew him now, respected him, trusted him to keep them safe. The janitor was gone, replaced by something better. A man who'd reclaimed his identity, rebuilt his life, and discovered that standing up to face threats was always better than running from them. In the conference room, Victoria was already waiting, professional and focused, but her eyes warmed when she saw him. Beside her, the chair was empty. His chair now, his place at the table. He took his seat, opened his tablet, and prepared to help build something worth protecting. Because that's what partners did. That's what teams did. That's what people who'd stopped running and started fighting did. They built futures instead of hiding from pasts. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those futures included daughters who laughed too loud, friends who had your back, and second chances you never expected but absolutely deserved. Outside the conference room windows, the city spread out below them, full of threats and possibilities in equal measure. Caleb Ward was ready for both. And this time, he wasn't facing them alone. The meeting started and life went on. Normal, complicated, occasionally dangerous, but real. Finally, beautifully, undeniably real.